Okay, now we're live. Right. So today, this is Convince Me Otherwise. Today's topic is Allah slash Yahweh does not exist. Convince me otherwise. No. So the opinion that I hold is that Allah slash Yahweh does not exist. We're just going to go around the room now and see what other people's opinions are. So, Big Lebowski.
I agree. There's literally no evidence that something like that actually exists.
Okay. And Delilah.
I don't think we can be sure about the existence of God or any other supernatural entities. It might not be God, Allah or Yahweh, but there is a possibility that a higher being or a creator might exist.
Okay, we'll circle back to that in a moment. I mean, just get everyone else's views. Doolittle.
Yeah, I'm not a deist in the sense of believing that a supernatural being, whether it's the Christian God or the Muslim God or any of the other ones like Zeus or any of those, exist as a corporeal form. But I do think they exist as states of mind that people have. If you're willing to grant that as existence, so I think that a God exists in the same way that a computer program exists. That a computer program isn't a physical object, but it's a configuration of something that is a physical object. So I think it's quite clear that Allah does exist in people's minds as an idea or as a set of beliefs, but whether it exists as a physical object, that's highly doubtable in my opinion.
Okay. It's Daniel. What do you think about this topic? I've seen you come off of mute, but we're not getting any audio from you. Okay, it seems it's Daniel maybe having some technical difficulties. We'll circle back to you in a moment and see if you've got that fixed. Travis, do you want to put your opinion forward, or are you AFK? No, looks like Trav's AFK. Okay, it's Daniel. How you doing? Okay, Delilah. Remind me, what was your position again? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. If nobody's responding, I do have a question to Doctor though. Like, if that's the case, do you think unicorns exist? Because there might be some people who believe in unicorns and leprechauns. If it's like a matter of like if they believe it in their mind, then it does exist. Like, how do you separate the fact of somebody believing something and it actually existing?
Yeah, sorry, I had trouble coming off of mute. I've got stuff in my hands. My personal definition of exist doesn't grant existence to ideas. So, but I do acknowledge that a lot of people do grant existence to things that are just ideas. So, but I think Allah exists in exactly the same way that unicorns exist.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, that makes it a lot clearer now. So basically, you think Allah doesn't exist?
I don't think computer programs exist either.
Ooh, in the same way that
So
unicorns don't exist.
In the same way that unicorns don't exist. So computer programs are, descriptions of things the descriptions of the configuration of things that do exist. So there's a meta, sort of a meta existence, So I would say computer programs meta exist because they exist as descriptions of things that are real, or descriptions of the configurations of things that are real. And in the same way, Allah is, or any god, any deity that you use to configure your own behavior or your own idea structure or your morality, that's sort of a meta existence. It's not, it's not an object in the physical world, but it is something that can be used as an instruction set to let's just say run a program in a machine or in your brain, programming. So in that way it exists. If you want to argue that computer programs do exist, then I would say you have to also argue that Allah exists. It exists in the same way as a computer program.
Wait,
I think that's an interesting point.
I think I would disagree with that though, because like computer programs are lines of code and the lines exist, so I'm not exactly seeing the parallel. Like God exists as an idea, I get that point, but like how is it related to the computer program?
In the Bible are lines of code, the same thing as lines of code.
Got you there. What my response to that would be, God can't run my laptop, but a computer
He can run your life. He can influence the way that your brain works, so that you do what he wants.
Yeah, but also, Doctor, that analogy, like, yeah, somebody can say like the text of the Bible exists. That doesn't mean the notions of what's in the Bible actually exist. So, like, to me, like with specifically computer code, it is a string of ones and zeros that are formulating some sort of like logical function, but all that lives either on like a platter or in like a solid state drive, or even going back to like Fortran punch cards, right? So there was like a physical reality to it. So like, but that doesn't mean I think you're better in the actual code, talking about like the purpose of the code, if you get what I'm saying.
Sorry, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you see a 1 or a 0 as existing. Actually, the transistor exists, and it has a state. And a 1 or a 0 is a description of the state of the transistor.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not. The 1 or the 0 doesn't exist. It's your description of the state of something that does exist.
Yeah, but those ones or zeros do actually have to exist, whether it's on a punch card or a hard drive or a solid state drive, where you have a binary system that says either turn on an electrical signal or turn off the electrical signal.
Yeah. And to give a concept of God and morality to another person through writing, the letters on the page have to exist, and the same way that the ones and zeros do in a computer punch card that you're using to feed into a computer to program it.
Yeah. That's why I was saying like I guess like the better analogy with that would be like, yeah, the Bible does exist. Here's the specific words or codes that we have. It doesn't necessarily mean that what it's coding for exists. Right. I guess that's how I would break it down.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a heart personally when I use the word exist. In my own language, I don't like to call descriptions of the states of things existing. So that's just, I mean, whether there's a physical object there or not, or whether you're talking about the description of a physical state, or a state of a physical object, I think it's important to draw a line between those. So,
would you at least concede, though, that a computer program does exist more than a unicorn?
So if I think of a unicorn, then I have a brain state which conjures the image of a unicorn, and so the description of my brain state when I'm thinking of a unicorn is the same way as the configuration of something that does exist, like transistors.
As
Which,
a concept, perhaps, but you can't interact with a unicorn in the same way as a computer program.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that.
Well, can you buy a unicorn?
You can interact with a keyboard, which, when you punch a key on a keyboard, it changes the state of a capacitor or some other device which interacts with some wiring inside of a computer, which eventually does go and change the state of some transistors on your platter.
Okay,
or
but
magnetic spins on your platter.
You can interact with the program, though, right?
And you can interact with the concept of a unicorn in your mind. Like, for example,
you can't actually
and
interact with a unicorn, though.
And I can say, imagine that the unicorn is spitting a rainbow, and you can imagine that can give you the imagination of a unicorn that's flying through, shitting out some diarrhea rainbow.
Okay,
and
it's funny you should mention.
I'm interacting with the unicorn in your mind with my words.
It's funny you should mention imagination there, actually, because even if we both tried our hardest, we would not be able to imagine exactly the same thing. If we had a computer program and we activated it, we would both see the exact same thing being run, which is not the same as imagination.
Quite probably. Computers are much more...
Well, we would, because the program is running in objective reality.
Computers are much more precise.
We can both observe it being run. We can't both observe the same unicorn, because that only exists in our individual imaginations.
Right, but I can... if we're not talking about a unicorn, something that's not so well defined, I can, in my imagination, think of a skyscraper and use a certain art called architecture to translate my description of what I'm imagining onto something called blueprints, and give that to almost any builder in the world, and they would all build it almost all the same way based on the blueprints that I gave them, which it's a way more precise way of transmitting your imagination to another human being, or to manifesting it in the real world.
But can you do that for God, though?
Can I do what for God?
Imagine God, make a blueprint of God, give it to someone, and have them create God in the exact way you described, in the exact way that's listed in the Bible of Yahweh, maybe, or Allah.
I don't know. I'm not a deist still, so it's I can conjure an imagination of a God, and then I can write what that means to me in a text, and then give you that text, and that will give you similar ideas to what I was thinking, assuming that we speak the same language. So I can reconfigure your brain in the image of God, which I'm imagining, or I can at least attempt to. But the problem with human brains is they're not really all that precise. They're not precise machines. So you can't really give someone else an idea very precisely.
Delilah,
it takes a lot more process.
Precision or interpretation in this case.
Yeah.
What was that, Delilah?
Seems like there might be like a distinction here being made against like objective reality and figurative reality, right? So like figurative reality, somebody can come up with an idea to make a wheel, and that wheel, the idea of it did come from somebody thinking about this method and creating something. But once you have like an objective reality, you actually have the wheel. You don't have the idea of the wheel anymore, right?
I just wanted to say Delilah's been trying to get in there. I don't know if you can hear her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Well,
let me turn your volume up, Delilah.
My question was about what he mentioned earlier. I don't think the idea of God being different for everyone, not just everyone, just what was mentioned earlier now. I agree with that. I don't think it's about precision, but interpretations. The idea of God generally is a very subjective matter. I don't really think that happens because our brains are imprecise machines, but it's more of we have a subjective way of thinking when it comes to several things. One of them is God, and I don't really think it's about precision.
Doolittle, do you have a response to that?
I'm trying to consider what she was saying, and I'm hoping she expands on it a little bit.
So you said that our idea. You said if you designed a blueprint of God and or an idea of God and you explained it to somebody else, they would have some sort of idea or imagination of God, right? But your imagination or your interpretation of your God and the other person's interpretation of your God would be different, right?
Not necessarily.
But there would be a slight difference.
Right, quite possibly, since we're all humans, yeah, and that would be subjective, based on people's subjective. Yeah.
Do you think that stems from our brains being imprecise, or does it stem from us being very subjective beings, and the fact that the idea of God is a very subjective matter for almost everyone?
I think that we're subjective because our brains aren't perfect machines that are all programmed the same way. So I don't think we're disagreeing. For example, if what I think God is the way that your brain would. So if I think that God is the superordinate principle which dictates the way that we ought to live our lives and make decisions morally and things like that. And if I was to take all of those dicta of what kind of ways you should live your life and write it down into a book in the form of parables and sometimes laws and rules, and then I was to give that to you and you were to read it, you would get a pretty good idea of how you should live your life if you were to, allow your brain to be rearranged in such a manner that you actually believed it and lived your life through those principles. So, and every person would do it a little bit differently because, well, words mean slightly different things to us, and you might choose to pay attention to one thing over another. But certainly, if you give the same book to 1,000 people and they all read it, there's going to be a lot in common that they have in terms of their associations and what they choose to think is good and what they choose to think is bad. Assuming that they buy into your book.
I get your point. On a slightly different matter, what do you think of Dostoevsky's argument about the existence of God? Where he said, if God doesn't exist, then all is permitted. I don't think it's the exact same words, but it's like same concept.
Are you asking me? I think we're trying to convince Mace. We're trying to convince Mace that God exists in some way or another.
Yeah, I mean, we're really just waiting for an actual theist to hop in, so I don't mind if you want to talk about that one quickly.
Okay. If God doesn't exist, then all is permitted. Well, at least until we learn what's good and bad for ourselves. I think people are capable of sense-making and rationalism. And in the absence of somebody else telling you how to live your life, I think you can probably figure out 90% of it.
But do you think that human beings should be guided by this idea of someone who watches over them, someone who would punish them if they don't do according to the laws? The fear of being thrown into hell, or the basic principles of the Judeo-Christian or any sort of religion for that matter.
Do I think that?
Oh yeah,
Um,
just as an idea, not that it's generally true, but like, do
I
we
think it
need
could help
that to
some
perform
people.
as a society, to perform better as a society?
Yeah, I think it could help some people.
Uh,
The human beings have a pretty wide range of how good we are at figuring out how to interact with one another.
I'm aware
There are people that without the fear of law or the fear of some supernatural being, they're gonna in all kinds of crazy ways.
Sorry to cut you off there, but I'm aware we do have some new people in the room, so I'm just going to pass the mic over to Dr. Bombay. Dr. Bombay, my position is that Allah/Yahweh does not exist. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I would not disagree. Some people say I am an agnostic. I do not profess that there's a God, and I won't say there isn't. I'm willing to listen, but I listen to a lot of arguments. I've listened to what atheists said, and I actually just wanted to say something to you guys, which is very interesting, and I found this very interesting from an atheist. When it came to, God and morality, if there's no God, we wouldn't be able to do right and wrong. The atheist believes that we do have morality, objective morality, and this is what he said. Morality is a measurement of interaction between different agents in an environment, just like fitness is a measure of the ability for the organism to survive in an environment. So morality is an emergent property like that. That is how it can be objective without it being grounded in a God. And it took me a while to try and understand what he was saying, and I'm still struggling with it, but it kind of made sense in a way, because without a God, human beings could still have an objective morality based on how they survive within an environment. And in regards to if there's a God or not, just to quickly answer Mace, I haven't seen any evidence that would confirm 100% that a God exists. So at the moment, I guess I would argue with the Abrahamics that their God doesn't exist. They haven't provided any evidence for it. So that's where I am at.
Okay. Thank you for that. Uncle Rob, what do you think?
I would kind of like to have a definition of terms. The announcement said Yahweh/Allah, and then the word God's been the one tossed around. So do we have a definition of God?
We're not talking about the concept of God more broadly. We're specifically looking at the God described in the Abrahamic religions.
Okay, because from the I go to AA meetings a lot, and one of the first things is that I turn my will and care over to God as I see it, a God of my understanding. So there's a lot of talk about, that's like the second step, a lot of talk in the rooms about what all that means, and all the people who, think that it makes the AA 12-step program like this some sort of religious cult, which is always funny to hear. I think some of the best definitions and most relatable definitions of what a God might be, not the one described in the Abrahamic traditions, but the ones that are spoken by old timers who have, spent the last 20 years sober because the 20 years before that had been a complete mess. They've been through hell and they don't want to go back. Spirituality is for people, religion is for people who want to go to heaven when they die, and spirituality is for people who've been through hell and don't want to go back. So I know this is way off the definition, I guess, of terms, but it's important when you really decide that you want to pursue a understanding of a power greater than yourself, which is ultimately the definition that is most comfortable for a lot of people. And so I am convinced that there is a power greater than me out there, and so I vote in favor of a God existing. And that's pretty much it.
Do you believe that the Abrahamic God exists, though?
Yeah, I do.
You said that.
I'm gonna say that I am not informed enough about the Abrahamic God to subscribe to it. So it might exist for some people, but I'll just call my God the good orderly direction, and that satisfies.
Okay.
I do believe Abrahamic God exists.
I can't tell whose voice that is. Is that Canadian Catholic?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm okay, thanks.
Do you like to drink a bowl of water?
You're really quiet, Canadian Catholic. Can you turn up your mic a bit?
Oh, no problem. I like tomato and lettuce.
There you go.
Yeah, so anyway, Canadian Catholic. So just to confirm, you do believe in Yahweh, as per your name would suggest, I'm guessing.
I do believe in Yahweh. I do.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
I think evidence leans that way.
What evidence do you have?
So the evidence I have, sir, is if we look at... Why are you smiling?
Because you were... Oh, I thought you were joking around, sorry.
How do you think I'm joking? You don't think I'm sincere about my faith?
No, I thought you were joking with the accents.
What?
I thought you were mimicking my accents.
I'm not.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm not. Okay. Now, the reason why I believe in Yahweh is because I think there's plenty of evidence for God in general. I think if you look at cosmological arguments, teleological arguments, and what we would expect on the God hypothesis, we see that a lot. And then the question is, what are the attributes of the Abrahamic God? Whatever else somebody might think. Well, Abrahamic God is revelatory. He reveals himself, right? And what do we observe in the world? Well, we observe that which is consistent with revelation. The only known intelligent species almost universally and ubiquitously has a God concept in religion. That's not necessarily expected of a non-revelatory God hypothesis. So that's why I think that's one reason why Abrahamic God has more plausibility. The other point is that Abrahamic God is described as immaterial. And this is a immaterial, in many ways ineffable, which is a positive thing, and that occurs, that is ubiquitous throughout the text. If you want to go to the earliest Jewish texts, you see this description over and over and over again. And as we know, this is the only God that can, logically speaking, exist from natural reason, and I've demonstrated that plenty times. That's another favorite for the Abrahamic God. Well, the other is the historical evidence, I would say. I think the Abrahamic religion's success is more expected on the view that there is an Abrahamic God than there isn't. And I mean, those are a couple of reasons why I would lean that way, I guess.
Okay. What would you... Because, I mean, you were quite non-specific there. So if you were to try and convince someone like myself who doesn't believe that Yahweh exists, what would be your best arguments?
Well, I don't know. Do you believe other gods exist?
No. Well, actually, with other gods it's different. With Yahweh, I'm confident enough to say he definitely doesn't exist. With other gods, I can't say that he does or doesn't. Like, I'm kind of just like, I don't know.
You think there's more open question for Zeus existing than Yahweh?
With Zeus, I can confidently say he doesn't exist either. There are some gods I'm confident they definitely can't exist, and then there are some where it's like kind of plausible, but there's just no evidence.
Well, have you been to the top of Mount Olympus lately?
I'm sorry, sir. Now, so what is the reason Yahweh cannot exist?
I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that describe him, and the way he's described is contradictory in some ways, and there are also some descriptions of him which are simply just logically incoherent, like the idea that he's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. What was it? Omnibenevolent, omnipresence, and omnipotent. Those three things, they can't go together because I'm not sure if you've heard the famous saying of something like, if God is all-good and all-knowing, and evil exists in the world, then that means he's not all-powerful.
That's not
Or
what you said. You said that those three attributes can't exist together.
hang on a minute. Let me bring up the quote. The quote is really good. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but
That's from Epicurus. It goes, if God is all powerful, then why is evil, so on and so forth. Why doesn't he prevent it? I'm not interested in that. You said the three attributes together can't exist. Now
Yeah.
you're saying it can exist, but not if evil exists. So which one is it?
okay, sorry, yeah, they can't exist because we know that evil definitely does exist.
So let's say a modification. There's these three attributes, but also the fourth idea is that there's a morally sufficient reason for allowing evil. Do you think that these three attributes can exist with that?
Say that again, sorry.
I'm sorry, sir. Are you deaf or something?
No, you just broke up a bit.
So let's just imagine that we have all those three attributes. Evil exists, and there is one caveat. God has a morally sufficient reason for allowing some evil. Do you think there is still a contradiction with evil existing and those three attributes?
I suppose, but isn't the definition of I suppose if evil was morally good.
No, not evil. Not evil. Evil isn't morally good, but there's a morally sufficient reason for allowing evil.
If there was a morally sufficient reason to allow evil, then I suppose they could exist, but isn't the definition of evil that it's immoral?
But we're not saying that evil is good. We're saying that there is a good reason to allow evil. You see the difference? So I'm not saying that losing is fun, but I'm saying losing is necessary to have sports. And sports are fun. That's the same thing I'm saying here. Evil isn't good, but evil is necessary for another good. So what's wrong with that? What's logically contradictory about God with those three attributes, and evil existing, but also being that caveat is...
The logical contradiction is that an all perfectly good God who's incapable of being evil has created a world where evil exists. It doesn't really make sense.
What's the contradiction if he has a morally sufficient reason for doing so? Is your argument that there can't be such a morally sufficient reason?
Yeah, because if he's all powerful, that means he could have made a world where evil doesn't exist.
Can I just chime in real quick?
No, you may not. No, you may not.
I believe the original.
So why did you ask? You're not going to believe me.
Pronoun confusion is. I don't know if God wants to go by he.
Yeah, he wants to go by he. No, he wants to go by he.
See, that's a problem.
Well, that's a problem.
We'll circle round to the pronoun thing later. Let's just stick to the omnibenevolent part at the minute.
Yeah, I have an issue with God being all powerful, and then you're using the word allow as he has to allow something.
I'll be with you in a second.
The word you're using the word allow. Now hold on a second. I'm talking. I didn't interrupt you for like 5 minutes there.
I'm gonna deafen myself.
If you're using the word allow, that implies that God is not the only agent in the world, which means that somebody else has some power and some dominion over some part of the universe that God does not have dominion over.
He muted himself, so if he's going to do that, should he still be allowed to take part in the discussion?
Yeah.
He literally just muted himself. So
I'll address it. Canadian Catholic, can you not deafen yourself? Because that's very rude. What he was saying was relevant to this part of the discussion.
I'll engage with him after I'm done with you. Is that okay?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a group discussion, and what he was saying was relevant.
Yeah, but you are saying that there's a logical problem. They are not. If they are, I'll be happy to address it. But you are the one saying that, so why can't I address you?
All right, if you're,
you haven't given a reason.
Sorry, one bit. If you're incapable of having a discussion with multiple people at once, then okay, we can do this one at a time. If you absolutely have to do it like that. But
we can do a group discussion, but if you're making the point, I'm addressing you, and somebody chimes in, then the point is lost.
Okay, right, we'll do it one at a time just for you then. So, even if there is a morally sufficient reason for God to allow evil, which doesn't really make sense, I see another logical inconsistency in the fact that God is all-powerful but incapable of being evil.
Sure, God isn't evil for allowing evil. How does that follow?
No, he's just described in the Bible as being incapable of being evil.
Sure, I agree with that. He's not capable of being evil. So
Wouldn't that suggest he's then not all-powerful?
no, because all-powerful means that he can do all things, and logical contradictions are not things, so he can't do logical contradictions.
But he can't do something as simple as being evil. I can do that, which makes me more powerful than him in a way.
No, you can't do logical contradictions either. See, if God could do logical contradictions, that would be wrong for you, because God could exist and arguments against him succeed at the same time. You're checkmated from both sides. You're checkmated.
Checkmated. So just to confirm, God is incapable of being evil, right?
Right, because he's good. He can't.
So how is he omnipotent? Where is it? Omnipotence.
Omnipotence means being able to do everything.
But he can't do anything that's evil.
For a good being to be evil is not a thing. It's a logical contradiction. It doesn't mean anything. It's like saying...
We agree it is a logical contradiction.
It is, and God can't do those things which don't exist, or aren't a thing, right? God can do all things. That doesn't include those things that aren't things. Logical contradictions are incoherent. They are just semantically devoid of any content. They refer to nothing.
Okay. I'm afraid I don't really agree with you, and I don't find that argument convincing. Because you're not really convincing me that the contradiction doesn't exist. You're saying it does exist, but it's okay.
No, it doesn't exist. But if we were to take your definition, you're checkmated then. So if I were to say that God is all powerful in your sense, and any argument for God can succeed, and he can still exist, so the discussion would be completely pointless. And God can make it so that he exists and also doesn't exist at the same time. And God can make it so that there is no evidence for him, but there is evidence for him at the same exact time. So you could be correct by saying there is no evidence, and I could be correct that there is evidence. So either way, you're checkmated. This way, you're checkmated because the evidence is against you, and that way, you're checkmated because you're reduced to absurdity. You're checkmated from both sides. You have no escape.
I'm not sure I agree with you there. If something is a if something is a logical inconsistency and he's unable to do that, I think that proves that he's not all powerful. But anyway, I don't think we're going to get anywhere down this line of thinking. So I'm going to pass you over to Doolittle now, if that's okay.
Who else wants to be checkmated? Come on.
Doolittle, your turn.
I'm happy to be checkmated. I wanted to point out that.
What's up?
You use the language that God allows evil because it's morally, he has a morally sufficient reason. God allowing something implies that there's another agency that has dominion over some part of the universe that God does not have dominion over. Therefore, he's not all-powerful.
No, that doesn't follow at all. You have to understand that there's different kinds of causation. So this has been known since Aristotle. So the fact that there's a first mover doesn't mean that there isn't a second mover, right? So the fact that, for example, I hit you with the ball doesn't mean the ball also didn't hit you, right? I didn't hit you with myself. Ball also has causal powers. I am just the first cause, hierarchically, and then there's the second cause of the ball. So that's the same thing. If God causes evil, for example, using a rock is also a secondary cause of evil. So that's another mistake and confusion you have. That's okay. You can work those confusions.
Following that line of reasoning, would it stand to say that God is evil for allowing Satan to go into the Garden of Eden?
No, it wouldn't follow that God is evil.
No, I mean I can understand the line of reasoning that let's just say if God wanted to have the maximum amount of good, right? And the situation was such that more good could be achieved if there was less. If there was some evil to counterbalance it. If his goal was maximum good and his goal wasn't minimizing evil, it's totally logical that he would want more good, and then he would have to allow some evil so that he could have more good. Does that make sense?
Why does more evil necessarily mean more good?
Because there are certain goods which can't exist.
Like what?
Without a corresponding evil, like curing cancer. Like curing cancer, for example. You can't cure cancer unless there's cancer in the first place. Cancer is evil. Curing cancer is good.
Stop. So, for example, triumph. Triumph is an example of something that can't exist without some evil. Loyalty, overcoming adversity, freedom of the will, or morally significant freedom cannot exist without the possibility of evil. Sports cannot exist without some possibility of evil. Competition cannot exist without any possibility of evil, and so on and so forth. That there can't be anything like that. Olympic Games cannot exist if there is no possibility of evil, because losing is disappointing and disappointment is not good, right? So, you're stuck arguing that God doesn't exist because Olympic sports exist. It's just a pathetic argument.
Right. So then we can look at what happens after we die. We go to heaven. Yes.
Not everybody.
No. But for those that believe in God, we go to heaven. Yes.
Well, if you're a Christian.
Yes. Okay. So now that asks the question, right? What's the point of the minimum amount of time we spend on Earth to spend an eternity in heaven, doing the exact same thing that would have happened if God had just made us start in heaven? What's the point of Earth? Basically, that's, I guess, a question.
I don't know if I'm allowed to plug it. So I did this exact question with Richard Swinburne. Most of you who know Richard Swinburne, congrats. Those of you that don't, you need to learn. The problem is, well, why didn't God just start out with heaven? Well, one is God isn't obligated to do that. So, I mean, that's not a direct answer, but also there isn't anything contradictory you've brought forward, right? Which is what you were supposed to do, or somebody here. Secondly, the point is that heaven really is a work in progress kind of thing. So heaven isn't something people start out in, because again, people in heaven will not, for example, have everything that people in heaven don't. Heaven is basically a choice, right? So people that continually follow the good and are honed in skills no longer have the desire to do that because God protects them, God sustains them, so on and so forth, and they achieve heaven, right? But for God to start you off in heaven would mean that process wouldn't exist. So that's the problem. Now, what you're asking is why couldn't God create a world where there was no evil? But I've already explained to you, God could have done that, but you would miss out on other good stuff. We've already gone over this.
Right, because if you're in heaven, you're missing out on the other good stuff as well.
Well,
what good stuff?
Well,
whatever good stuff you listed. I mean, he said competition and sports and all that other good jazz. If you're in heaven for the eternity, all that good is gone. And as we know, if you're in the presence of God, you're with the ultimate good. So if all that good stuff that you listed as a necessity for evil is gone in heaven, then what's the point of evil in the first place? It's not needed in heaven.
Okay, so what you're asking is why... Oh, somebody's calling me for no reason. Sorry, so what you're asking is, do we have... So, I mean, to one degree, it's true that in heaven we do not have some of the stuff here. But to the existence in heaven... so let me see how can I put this. So existence in heaven is really coming to be with God, right? Coming to be with God. Now the question is, why can't I be with God? Well, it's simple, because you have original sin, right? Sin. Oh, somebody's calling me. I'll be back in 1 minute. Okay, I'll deafen myself. I'll be back in 1 minute. I'll answer Gigler. I'll jump back. Okay. I like your questions, Daniel. You're challenging me, or whoever was asking. I'll be back in 1 minute exactly.
Okay, let's move on to, do we have Snark in the room? Snark, I've had, some, reports that you may be a theist, is that true?
Ooh, I think maybe is the key word right there.
Oh, okay, what's your opinion on the topic?
Well, if I'm a theist, it's gonna be Jewish, because I come from a Jewish background, and, let's say I've been exposed to the most convincing arguments on that front. Alright, so that's going to be Old Testament stuff, no New Testament stuff.
Do you believe in the existence of Yahweh?
Oh, that would imply that. Are you asking if I do or don't? That's something I'm struggling with at the moment, but I could
Okay.
definitely give you, arguments that have been given to me, and you could debunk, answer them, or whatever if you're interested.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so how far back would you agree that you could trace the Old Testament? That it clearly existed unchanged? How far back would you agree?
I don't know. No idea. I'm guessing approximately 2,000 years, maybe a little more.
Yeah, so it is a little bit more now. According to the Old Testament, the 5 books were given about 3,000 years ago.
Okay.
There is no date in the Bible. Where did you come up with 3,000 years?
You can follow the events that the Israelites followed. Like if you go through the entire Old Testament, it's not only the 5 books, but it's the continuation. But anything of the Old Testament, you can trace it pretty well to. Basically, it ends with the Roman age, so it's and it's all listed there, the numbers and everything.
But it talks about a time they were in Egypt, but there are no hieroglyphs or tablets talking about this period.
All right, Jenkins, I'm back.
Again, you could. It's the same reason that that in theory the world was created a little less than 6,000 years ago, right? It's all I cannot give you an immediate proof of that, but the numbers are pretty clear. I don't have it on hand. I really don't. Okay, but the numbers are pretty clear that the Old Testament was given about 3,000 years ago, more or less. 3,300, I think. It's something like that.
I would disagree with that. There's no evidence for that. Some of the oldest civilizations go all the way back to the Fertile Crescent known as Mesopotamia, Sumeria, Ur, and in there is no information at all relating to a guy called Abraham or any of these things in the Old Testament. So I don't know how you're coming up with the dates.
Okay, so let's take a step back.
Actually, I think I have heard somewhere that the Old Testament says the world is only like 5,000 years old or something.
That's calculated because the Old Testament was given 3,000 years ago, so it can't talk about 6,000 years, 3,000 years ago, because then it was only 3,000 years old. So it's all like calculated according to those events. Whatever. The point is, and again, this is only a claim for the Israelites and the Jews, right? The point is that there's a very consistent history, right, of going that you could trace back all the way to at least when they were in the Middle East, when the Romans kicked them out. All right, and most historians would agree you could trace it back even further. All right, so the only question is, what would be the source of the Old Testament? Right, because and again, and I wouldn't be able to give you in detail, but you could at least agree that 2,000 years, the Old Testament has remained completely unchanged. It's remained in its original form.
I'd say the ultimate source would be a human who claims to be divinely inspired.
Right, so that would be Moses in theory, right?
It'd be whoever wrote or started writing the Old Testament.
No, it would be Abraham, because it's from Abraham that the Israelites come from.
Is Abraham the first author?
He's the one who makes the covenant. Well, God makes a covenant with Abraham.
Is Abraham just a character, or is he actually the author?
Yep.
So again, he is considered the father of everything. But who the person who gave the Israelites the 5 books is Moses. It's not Abraham. Right? Would you agree with me there?
Abraham.
Oh yeah, with that I would agree with you there. But the same line of questioning that I would do for Abraham, I would do for Moses, because I would require, archaeological evidence, historical evidence that these men even existed. Because we're talking about them like they actually existed. There's no evidence to prove they even existed. So to try and build a time frame, like when was Abraham born? It says he was born in Ur. It doesn't give a time or date when he was born, and it doesn't tell us what date he died. So this is why I find it interesting that you have this timeline that you can say, well, we know 2,000 years. It's like, where are you getting it from?
Again, if you want precise sources, I cannot give you at the moment. We know that the Jews were kicked out of the Middle East about 2,000 years ago. That's well documented. Any historian will agree with that. All right, so we know the Jews were here in the Middle East at some point, right, 2,000 years ago, and then they were spread out. And nowadays, every original copy in ancient Hebrew is precisely the same, with tiny, tiny differences of letters being lengthened or shortened. There's like 6 differences between the different, whatever. But the point is, so I'll give you an example, right? There's a verse there that says that God was feeding the Israelites in the desert, right? He was raining food down from the sky. How would you insert, right? And again, it's all about playing with the timeline, but how would you insert such an absurd story, all right, and have an entire nation believe it? All right, this is a little long and complicated. If you guys want to move on to something else, feel free, because I'm only like 50% to my point.
And what is the point exactly? Because
I think everyone would like to hear it. The point is to hear arguments from theists for the existence of Yahweh. So I think you're the closest thing we've got here. So let's hear your argument.
All right. So it works like this. All right. And again, you guys, I cannot give you sources offhand. If you want, like, I could get back to you with some sources if you want. All right. But the point is, there's only a few options for the origin of the book, right? Option number 1 is that, someone came to the Israelites one day and said, listen, I found our history. I found our book. This is where we come from. This is our history. This is our, this is who we are. And God exists and all of this. And he made it up completely. And he, somewhere in this timeline of history, tried to convince the Israelites or the Jews, right, that this is their history, this is their book. Okay, and the reason that this is claimed to be impossible is because there is no way that the Israelites would not remember such a day, right? The Israelites, they have days for, the Jews nowadays have days for every single thing that happened historically. All right, and if there was some day that somebody suddenly fell on them in the timeline and suddenly came with the 5 books and said, yo, this is our history, this is God, he exists, there's such a thing, and he exists and whatever, that's a day that would be remembered. Right? That's a day that would not be forgotten. There is no religion that doesn't remember, the day, something huge happened, some huge event happened.
I think I'd have to disagree with that, actually. We've seen examples even in recent history where almost religious-like ideologies have slowly over time started to crop up until they hit the mainstream, and no one can point to a specific day when they actually started.
Yeah, so you're bringing a different theory here, man. You're bringing a different theory. I was bringing a theory of this guy, again, we're going to explore all the theories of how these books could have appeared, right? And I was talking about a specific theory, and I was explaining why that specific theory isn't possible in theory. Like, that's the claim, at least. Right, so this theory would say, okay, so let's say for a second, there was a nation, the Israelites were in the Middle East already, they were here, and suddenly somebody comes with this made-up book and he wants to convince the nation, listen, this is our history, we were in the desert, we were slaves in Egypt, there was an Exodus, and this is our book and God exists, right? Let's imagine that for a second. The reason this would be impossible is because there is no memory or history of if this guy came and managed to convince an entire nation, listen, this is your history, that would be a day that would be remembered. This is the day we learned who we are. We got our identity. You guys following me, or am I completely...
That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Is that what Moses did?
No. We haven't reached Moses yet.
I mean, because like
in
Moses
this theory, Moses is made
books.
up.
Okay,
in
because
this theory, Moses is a made-up character. He doesn't exist.
Sorry, did you say Moses is a made-up character?
If you follow this theory.
I'm telling you that if I'm following your theory, then the person that did that could be Moses, because he really came with 5 books and said, "This is your history."
Yeah, for example, agreed. Yeah. So option A would be trying to insert it somewhere in the timeline, right? And option A doesn't seem so plausible because how could it be that such a huge event happened that an entire nation believed they found their history and their identity and that God exists and they wouldn't remember that day? Right? There is no mention in religion anywhere of this day that suddenly they found their identity. So let's talk about option B. Right? Option B is a group of people came together, or even one person, right? And he said, listen, for whatever reason, maybe he felt the world wasn't being moral enough. And he said, we gotta put the fear of God into people, we'll make up this deity in the sky, we'll make up some bullshit. And we'll write down some rules because something has to be done. So maybe he was power hungry, maybe he felt the world was immoral and he wanted to insert some morality. Whatever the reason is, whatever the made up reason is, right? This would be option B, right? That some people or a group of people decided, listen, we're gonna pretend this is real 100%, even though we know it's bullshit because we made it up. We're gonna pretend this is real, and we're gonna teach our children as if it's real, and we're gonna tell our friends as if it's real. We're gonna go 100% as if these books were God given, right? So they're all planning it out. They're gonna come up with a story, how God gave the books out of the heaven and they were slaves in Egypt or whatever, right? But they're trying to make it up. All right, we're following theory number 2. Should I clarify anything? Or
I understand.
Can I offer a C potentially?
I'm following the theories that you're putting forward, but none of these are theories which. First of all, it's a false dichotomy because I don't think those theories are mutually exclusive, but also they're not particularly strong theories which I would subscribe to.
Yeah, no, again,
I'll
tell you what.
I think it might be worthwhile to just like if you believe Snark, give what your actual theory is instead of going down this like track of like here are all these possible theories. What is the theory that you would believe in if you actually?
So I said ahead of time I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to bring some claims that people have given. The end point of this is that there is no possible source of these 5 books except God. All right. Now I don't ascribe to this necessarily. I don't necessarily agree with that. Okay, but that's where it's leading. We're going to go through all the options of where these books could have come from. We're going to disprove them one at a time, and therefore, ergo, the only option left is that these books were written by God and given on Mount Sinai to the Israelites.
Ooh,
that's where this is going.
I would challenge that by
true.
I would challenge that by saying that the reason why these books, they basically come from a history of cultures that existed. So, for example, you go back 5,000 years. Again, we go back to Mesopotamia. You have Sumeria. You have Babylon, and in there they have something called the Code of Hammurabi, which is laws which were created, and in those laws you have things which are similar to an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. So the Israelites could easily have borrowed from the Code of Hammurabi. You then have other stories like Sargon of Akkad, whose story has a lot of similarities to the guy called Moses. And then you have another story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which comes from Sumeria, where you have the flood, which also ends up in the Old Testament. So I believe that over a period of time, people borrowed these stories and they put it together to come up with a new religion.
Right. So Dr. Bombay, let me challenge you there for a second. All right. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I don't necessarily ascribe to this theory. I'm just trying to represent it the best I can. All right. So tell me exactly, give me an estimate of what you would imagine would be the period of time this was written in, by whom, and with what motivation. Right. These 5 books. I'm specifically talking about the first 5 books. What are they called in English? Like Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy. English is not the best.
I stated earlier for those books, you couldn't give a timeline because they don't have one. So when he talks about the Garden of Eden being created, he doesn't give a time. So it's like, how can you come up with a timeline for that? There's no.
You tell me, bro. You tell me, bro. We know 2,000 years ago the Jews held these books, right? And they're the same books that we have today. 2,000 years ago, what was the source? Who wrote them? Who invented them? What's going on here?
the source for those books, I don't know who created those books. I believe they were created by man. The thing is that Moses created the book. Wrote the book. He was told so by God. But that in itself causes a major problem, because in Deuteronomy 34, Moses writes about his own death. He says he's going to die. So what, was Moses writing about his death in Deuteronomy? That doesn't make any sense if he's supposed to be the author who wrote these books.
That's a
So
very
he
famous
was going to die.
question. That's a very famous question. How could he write about his own death? That's a very, very famous question. Again, I could go through the answers, and I don't think that's what you're interested in.
Oh, you can try and give an answer. I don't mind. I mean, unless other people here want to move on to something else, I don't.
Let's start with the simplest solution to that specific issue. Moses was, in theory, a prophet. What does a prophet do? What is his abilities? What can he do?
I don't know.
He can tell the future, right? That's the whole idea of a prophet. That's the whole concept of a prophet, is that he has the ability to look into the future.
But was he actually, does it say that in the Bible that he could, not the Bible, sorry, in the books that God gave him the power to see into the future? Can you give a passage that confirms what you're claiming?
That he was a prophet? Yes, he's
not
called
that he
an
was a
ancient
prophet.
Hebrew. Well, no, that's the definition of a prophet.
No, that he could see into the future and he was able to see.
It's synonymous, man. Saying he was a prophet is the same as saying that he had some sort of ability of sight into future or elsewhere. It's
I would
synonymous.
need a verse confirming that, not just your interpretation.
It says
prophets die and dragons can breathe fire.
What?
I think with a verse, I don't remember the specific verse, but I know it says in the Bible that when God showed Moses the promised land, he said, you can see it, but you will never step foot in it, which is kind of prophesying to him, I guess. So it's seeing in the future in a sense.
No, that's God telling him that. I'm looking at that's in Deuteronomy 34. But where is it that Moses can see himself without?
That's true, because no one does anything in the Bible without the power of God. So if anyone is prophesying, it's because God is telling them the future. So if God has told Moses the future before, who's to say he didn't do it again?
Yeah, listen, my issue would not be with Moses writing his own death, because he literally, in theory, spoke to the deity that created the planet, right, or the universe. I don't think you would, I would draw the line much earlier than that. I wouldn't get stuck. Like, if you're willing to believe that Moses spoke to the creator of the universe, my issue wouldn't be, but he wrote his own death. How is that possible? You understand? My issue would be much earlier than that.
My issue kind of with something that you said was that, they disregarded the fact that, they never wrote down the day where their identity was revealed to them. That was your point A. Point B, it's impossible that a bunch of buddies would have gotten together and just made up this story. So let's jump to C. It's just came from outer space in the form of a spiritual being out of nowhere. I'd have drawn the line a lot earlier than that. I mean, I'd accept the theory that a bunch of guys got together and wrote it down. And the reason why there is no mention of a date when the Jews got their identity is because they just erased it. I mean, what parts of the Bible do we not have to read? What parts have been removed throughout time? We speak of how they've remained the same over the last, 2,000 years, I think you mentioned, but what parts were removed? So I think there's something to consider.
So we can agree. I only said 2,000 years because that's what Mace said, right? He said that he could have imagined do that, but there are pretty clear proofs going a little bit further than that. All right, basically, I'm trying to remember the precise numbers. I am so bad with numbers, but the book has stayed precisely the same. The book has stayed precisely the same for several thousands of years. We're talking about 2,500 or something like that. But I didn't finish point B actually, right? About the group of friends being able to impose this on on their children, and the reason for that being is there's a lot of things written. Sorry.
Isn't that the nature of books? They don't change. Like they're written down, and it's kind of like a rock. It'll stay the same for 2,000 years.
Well, yeah, but Rob was suggesting that it was edited. That maybe there was a day where a group of guys came up with it and convinced an entire nation somehow that this is their history. That day did exist and it was written down, and then for some reason it was erased out.
Oh, well, it just seemed like it was like, oh, isn't that miraculous? The book didn't change. Like books don't change by nature.
No, that's not miraculous.
Okay. All right.
That's not miraculous.
I think that's pretty spooky.
Not really.
I think it would be miraculous if a book didn't change for 2,000 years. I mean, things are changing all the time, especially.
Well, the book has changed. It's been translated and rewritten and censored, so it's not the same book, really.
Yeah, well,
but then
again, the copies we use here, the Jews use in Israel, are in ancient Hebrew, the exact same form as the Dead Sea Scrolls are. They are a precise copy, and that's Jewish law. You are forbidden to copy it in any other way without having like another one in front of you to copy it from. That's like very, very strict law.
So it's not allowed to be translated.
No, it's not actually. This was done. The original translations were done when the Egyptians took 70 different Jewish translators, put them all in separate rooms, forced them to translate it. And the reason they put them in 70 separate rooms was to make sure they get the same translation, right? As to make sure that the Jews aren't changing anything in the books when they're translating it.
The fact that it hasn't changed, though, how does that prove that is somehow related to a deity? Because, like I mentioned earlier, 10 minutes ago, the Code of Hammurabi by the Babylonians, that hasn't changed. The Epic of Gilgamesh, that hasn't changed.
No.
Sargon of Akkad, that hasn't changed either. Are we now going to start worshipping the gods that Sargon of Akkad worshipped because Sargon of Akkad's story hasn't changed in more than 4,000 years?
The fact that it hasn't changed is no proof, but the fact that it hasn't changed in conjunction with things that are written there. So, for example, it says there were 600,000 Jews at Mount Sinai that, they heard God, they saw God, they got them. So, you can't take a book that hasn't changed, right? And we're assuming that the same original people back then got this book, that it said in this book, listen, there were 600,000 people there. Now, if you're going to make up an event that never happened, right, and you're going to claim that in that event there was 600,000 people, all right, you're going to have to be smart about it, because 600,000 people leaves quite a trace. It leaves a mark, right? There's children, there's fathers that tell their children, and children that tell their grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So, option A to deal with this problem would be to say that it was made up, right? And shoved in history somewhere was shoved in, right? But we spoke about that and why that would be a difficult part. So
you said 600,000 people. Is that in the scriptures, or is
yes? That's in the
verse. What, in Exodus or something?
Yeah, it's gonna be in Exodus. If you want me to find a precise.
Wait a minute. So, just to be clear, is your argument this book has to be true because it was witnessed by 600,000 people, and we know it was witnessed by 600,000 people because the book says so?
Again, not my argument, just the argument that I'm representing at the moment.
Okay.
What the argument claims is yes, because there is no other option. Okay, that makes sense for the source of this book. Ergo, the only possible option left, however improbable, must be the truth, which means it's from God. And we still haven't gone through all the options.
Yeah, that's
I think that's a very bad.
Can you present
very bad argument?
Can you present
like today? we're told about 600,000 people today from a book, and so were they. It's not like, hey, yesterday, like we haven't. It just seems.
And this is where the Unchanged point comes in, right? This is where the Unchanged book is very important to the argument. Okay, it's not just Unchanged like Dr. Bambi says. That doesn't prove anything. It's not just 600,000 people. It doesn't prove anything. But if I were to come to all of you and say, listen, we were all out yesterday. All of us were out there yesterday, and you each promised you'd give me $100. Each one of you promised you'd give me $100. What would you say? You'd say, fuck off, get out of here. What the fuck is the argument? I'm not gonna give you $100.
Even that, you're gonna run into just like structural problems, right? So if like you take a group of people like Jewish people who have routinely been on the short end of the stick of like people killing them, right? So like if we went back maybe like 150 years, there might be more than this one specific book that says has been unchanged, like right, so like even with the Torah, like if it was changed 500 years ago but it was changed everywhere, you wouldn't know that book has never not been changed, right? So like it's that in of itself is an appeal to an authority, and there's a huge problem in that.
I'll say two things. I'll say two things about that. First of all, there are a lot of Jewish communities that were completely disconnected until the modern age, right? The Roman Empire took the Jews and they spread them out all over the place. You have Jewish Yemenites, you have Jewish Europeans, you have Jewish Iranians, you have all different kind of Jews in Africa, you have Jews all over, and every single one of those Bibles are identical to except 6 differences between the Yemenite one and the Ashkenazi one, which have longer letters and shorter letters. And besides the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, which were found, and other very, very ancient books of the Old Testament, prove that the book that we have nowadays in ancient Hebrew is precisely the same as the book they had back then.
No, because it doesn't prove that. You could even say, yeah, we can see what the Romans did, and they spread these Jewish populations far and wide. Those books might have changed over time, but then 200 years ago, when they all came back together, they, instead of like fighting amongst themselves like you would see between like Mormons and like fucking Lutherans and people like claiming that they know the right word, if everybody in this group all came together and said, okay, well, yeah, here's what we think is right, and then it changed to format that, then there is literally no way to know. It is an impossibility.
Yeah. All right. First of all, it's possible. What you're saying is very improbable, as we've seen.
Yes, very.
We've seen religions' reactions when different forms emerge. Right. Take for example the Sunnis and the Shias of the Muslim world. All right.
Yep.
And the Jews are no better. Trust me, I live here. When someone comes up with a new theory of what it should be or shouldn't be, they get shot down very quickly. Like their idea, their concept. And second of all, again, I'm not talking about 200 years ago. I'm talking about Old Testament books that were found that are much more ancient than that. We're talking about. I could look it up. What is the oldest? 1 second. What is the oldest Old Testament book that was found? It will at least prove to that time. Again, I don't necessarily agree with this theory, and I could poke many holes in it. I'm just trying to represent it the best I can.
Yeah. No.
You know what? While you look that up, I just want to say I can grant you for a moment, take it as a given that the Old Testament has been consistent for 3,000 or more years, and that doesn't prove to me that God exists or that the Yahweh is a physical object in the real world. Moses very well could have went up on the mountain and smoked some DMT and had some visions and decided to write down everything that he saw in his visions, and everything that he saw in his visions could be totally good and just and right, and and accurate in terms of creating what he was trying to create in terms of the Jewish people.
And maybe it was
And
inspired by some stories that he already knew.
But that doesn't mean that, it doesn't matter what inspired it, but is there a
Yeah.
physical object? Is there something physical in the real world that Yahweh that Yahweh represents? And if it was a vision that somebody got, which is
Smoking
entirely
something good.
possible,
Yeah.
he smoked something good, he got a vision,
Mhm.
he was entirely right and about everything. It could be true, it can be good, but it doesn't prove that God exists.
So let's explore that for a second, right? So Moses has this group of people down at the bottom. Let's go with the Bible for a second, right? Let's just say fine, there were 600,000 people there. He goes up, he smokes some incredible shit. It says he was there for 40 days and 40 nights. That's more than enough for, a super drugged up mind to write some incredible shit, and that's what happened, right? The reason that theory doesn't work is because it says some things in the Bible that just, people won't accept because, okay, so for example, the sea split, right? One second. The reason that this is happening, the sea split happened to the same generation that received the Bible. So if they're receiving a Bible that in this same Bible they're receiving, it says the sea split, and they didn't see the sea split, they'll be like, whoa, wait a second. You're trying to convince us the sea split for us, and we were there, and we know that it didn't? What's this bullshit?
Yeah, I think to that argument, you would have to consider the fact that that same generation that saw the sea split and that saw the pillar of fire by night and the cloud of whatever by day also decided to turn away from God, as in they firsthand witnessed the power of their God, and they still couldn't believe in him. Does that make sense?
Well, I think there's something you're missing here. The Bible could have been written and it had been shelved for 200 years. I think that's what Big Lebowski was saying. And then somebody picks it up and says, "Oh, look, this was my granddad's, and it talks about 600,000 people here or there." But 200 years have gone past before whenever this Bible took root, it could have been something that has been, for us, well, I mean, it could have been sitting on the shelf and everyone's dead that was ever
there.
Witnessed any or it was made up and written down and someone picked it up 200 years later after it was written.
It could have been a good story,
theory,
and then
that's the first theory I tried to address. Actually, what you just suggested.
What if everybody that was there? Yeah. What if everybody that was there knew the sea didn't actually split, and they just took it as they took it as an embellishment, and they were like, yeah, well, it's we know what he meant.
Well, also all those people who
there, then it's like, yeah, okay.
Also, all those people who saw the sea didn't split, their testimony hasn't been recorded. So we don't know if there was conflict like that then. You just wait 100 years, and then all of a sudden it takes root, and they claim that, this genealogy, this lineage is unbroken from the time the pen was written. There's no evidence of that.
Sorry, can I just confirm, Shia, have we had your input on this yet?
I guess when it comes to the sea splitting idea, it doesn't really matter. You're saying there was eyewitnesses there at the time. One guy mentioned that there would be conflict. We don't really know. There's no way to interview those people. Even the Book of Mormon there were several eyewitnesses there supposedly, that signed off on it, on seeing a lot of things that, Joseph Smith did back then. But we don't really give that a lot of credibility. So that's not really good enough evidence to support the idea that Moses actually did part the Red Sea.
What I meant was actually, do you believe Yahweh exists?
No.
No. Oh, okay. Is there anyone else in the room who we haven't spoken to yet? Fierce Taint, are you new?
I'm just chilling. I'm pretty neutral on this.
Okay. And have we heard from Kapowski yet?
Hey, I'm here. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, it's. I mean, sorry. Can you just listen to me? Sorry.
Okay, right. Sorry, who was giving a? Oh, that was it, Snark. Yeah. Is there any chance, Snark, you could give us an argument that you actually, a theory that you actually subscribe to yourself? I find it a bit difficult to engage in this conversation when you're
That's
able
fair.
to easily just say, yeah, well, it's not my theory, because then it's just
Well,
like, what's the point talking about it?
yeah, okay, so if you want to know my personal beliefs, right, and where I'm holding at the moment, I think you gotta split it up into two steps, right? And you worded this discussion very correctly by saying Yahweh or Allah, which is much better worded, right? Some people would say God, because when we're talking about just a creator, not necessarily Yahweh or Allah or whatever, a higher power, I think at the end of the day, you have two options, right? When we try to explore the origins of the universe. Option one is...
You like your options, don't you?
Yes, I do. Option one is that matter, right? Matter as we know it has always existed. Infinity. Anyone here learn calculus? All right, infinity. Very, very... Whatever, you gotta go back 1 billion years, matter existed. You go back 1 trillion years, matter existed. You keep going back, matter still exists. Option two is that matter didn't... Sorry?
No? Universe is 13.8 billion. Never mind. Figured out what you were saying.
I'm just bringing all the options, man.
Never mind. Yeah,
All
sorry.
right. Matter existed in one form or
I've got a
another.
feeling if you're talking about options for as options for where the universe came from, you're probably not going to have all those options.
No, so again, I think you can split it up into two categories. One option...
Only two.
One option, matter always existed. Option two, matter didn't exist, and then it did exist. Can we agree on that? Matter, when we're talking about matter either always existed, or it didn't exist and then existed at some point. There was some sort of change. Those are the only two options.
I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Okay, give me option three.
Lawrence Krauss's theory on how matter came from absolutely nothing.
There's an option that it doesn't exist right now, but you're just imagining it.
The process of matter existing is a function of space-time. So time, the concept of existence didn't exist before matter. It's mind-boggling, but the math checks out, apparently.
Lexicon, at the end of the day, what you're describing is option two, because there was a point where matter didn't exist, and then you claim it came out of nothing, and that's fine. I'm willing to go with that, right? But it didn't exist, and then it did exist.
Well,
right?
What about this option, like hard solipsism? If we're going to talk about knowledge, the only thing we can be maybe sure of is that we're experiencing a consciousness just for ourselves, and we wouldn't call ourselves God, and it's most likely that this consciousness is going to fade away. So, like to say, oh, Yahweh and Allah, we're going to debate that, but yet there could be a God. I mean, I think the only thing we can say we might know as individuals is that, like, we're here, but we're not necessarily have to define, like, people just want to throw this, like, God definition out there or term, but without, like, really defining it. It could be that I'm just experiencing an experience, but, what am I going to call myself? A Homo sapien or a God? Like,
guys, I really feel
a creator.
I really feel like you're taking what I'm saying and going very far with it. I'm trying to state a simple premise here. Matter currently...
If I can listen, if I know that you're simplifying it, and that's good in some ways, but we can't talk about, the notion of matter either always has been, or there was a time when it wasn't, and then there was a time when it was. Because
what other option is there?
Because we're also talking about a God. We say either
I
you're
haven't reached that
alive,
point yet.
you're alive or dead, but then the conversation swirling around the third option that there is some sort of God that exists outside of what we perceive as the two options, alive or dead. So how do we know that in the infinity unknown universe that there isn't something that goes beyond the binary there is or there isn't way of thinking?
Listen, you could, again, Uncle Rob, what you're saying, I don't know exactly what the term is, but I really don't like those arguments. Maybe we're all asleep and we're in the Matrix. Great. Is it relevant to us? No. We could only deal with what we do know. We are in
But we can't
a
make
reality.
a false dichotomy either. So that's the other thing.
Well, we can if we can't think of another option, right? If you want to bring option C to what I brought, go for it.
Yeah,
Go
I've
for it.
had to think
We can go
about
with what he
it.
said.
I've had to think about it. I'm willing to go with it because I can't think of another option. When I do think of other options, I think, well, actually, that kind of comes under one of the two that you listed. So, let's go with it for now.
All right, great. So glad we're on the same page. Now, I'm losing my train of thought here. All right, so either matter has always existed, or there was a point where it didn't exist, and it was a point where it did exist. Now, when you're faced with a 50-50 option, I don't know if it's 50-50, we'll discuss that in a second, but when you're faced with not 100% proof of one or the other, you gotta ask yourself what sounds more logical to your ears at the end of the day, right? Like a judge, what does a judge do? He'll hear, this argument and that argument, and at the end of the day, even if he's not 100% sure, he'll have to decide according to what, to his ears, rings more true. All right? You understand what I'm saying? So I'm just curious.
So what you believe to be true then is not necessarily based on evidence. It's just based on like an Occam's razor type thing. 50-50.
Put it that way. You could put it that way, but I wanna make it a little bit stronger than that. Mace, if you had to choose, right, between option A, matter has always existed to infinity, right, literally to infinity, or option B, right, matter didn't exist at one point, and then it did exist at one point.
I don't have to choose, so I'm not going to.
No, you don't. But let's say you had to.
I don't know the answer, so I don't see why I would try to make one up.
Okay.
I mean, I'll play with you, Snark. I'll say I have no problem with either one of those options you gave. I still want to know how that then proves that there's this all-knowing being that created the matter.
Oh no, we haven't reached that point yet. So
well, hurry up! I'm getting really excited.
I'm sorry, guys. It is 2:40 a.m. here, and I am a little bit drunk, so forgive me. But all right, so I'll tell you what. Most people I've spoken to, okay, for some reason they prefer option B. Now, based on evidence, not based on, I don't really care. They prefer option B, and if you ask me personally, for some reason, like, anything that has shape and form, no, sorry. Anything that exists feels, I don't know why, but it feels more natural to me that there was a point where it didn't exist and then a point where it did exist. Now, this is based on a fallacy, on bullshit, right, at the end of the day. All right? But when I have two options that are equally logical to an extent in front of my eyes, all I can do is say, well, this seems more likely. All right, why does it seem more likely? Sometimes you don't even know. It just does.
Where's the part where this is proof that Yahweh exists?
I did not say I'm proving where Yahweh exists. You asked me where. I asked you if you wanted to hear. I asked you if you wanted to hear where I'm holding personally in my personal life, because you said, well, I don't want you to take arguments.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your personal views on the topic at hand.
Oh yeah, it's gonna come to the topic at hand, man.
The existence of Yahweh.
Yes.
Okay.
I promise you. All right. And I never said I believed Yahweh existed. I said I'm at a what's it called, a crossroads.
Yeah, crossroads. Yeah, I remember you
I'm
saying
at a
that.
crossroads.
Yeah.
So I explicitly said that in the beginning when you invited me to talk.
See, this is how the original story started. Bunch of guys sitting around at 2:40 in the morning listening to their drunk friend tell a story, and he's a good storyteller though. And he's got us all wrapped around his finger.
Oh God, that is not how I want to look. All right.
Not really. I mean,
try to speed it
because
up.
we're all quite ruthless here. We want evidence, and well, most of us want evidence, and if the evidence isn't provided, you're not convincing us. But as was mentioned earlier, it is a good story, so I guess that's why most people are just patiently listening to you. But it keeps popping up, you know.
I'm not going to bring any evidence here. Let's be very clear. I am
So
not.
we're going with B. We're going with B. So what's next?
All right. So my personal feeling, I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. So my personal opinion is that matter didn't exist and then it existed. All right. Now, no one can truly. All right. And I know the theory of matter appearing out of nothing and all of that. I've done my research. I can't say I understood it, but no one can truly explain that process of matter appearing out of nothing, of not having matter and then matter appearing. Right? Now this doesn't mean that Yahweh exists, but this means that there's some form of process, of energy, of whatever the fuck you want to call it, that we cannot comprehend at the moment with our limited knowledge. Okay? Now some people call this not being able to comprehend with our limited knowledge God. Some people call it the Big Bang, all right? Some people will call it something out of nothing and use some very convoluted and complicated explanations of why it's possible and how it's possible. Okay, but at the end of the day, we are talking about a process that no one can recreate, that no one truly can explain scientifically.
Mark, you're right about that. But the problem is when people start, trying to think about some interesting hypothesis for what the answer might be. All of a sudden, you have people trying to smuggle in the agency behind this process, and
Well,
that's
I wouldn't
the problem
do that.
I have whenever people try to smuggle in some kind of agency behind this process. It's like, well, what the hell points you to any kind of agency? And then everyone just always comes up hands empty, and they're like, well, you're as stupid as we are because we have the same amount of proof, and that's, there's no point to bring agency into this when we look out in what's going on in reality, in physical reality, and we don't have any indication of agency in any of these physical processes or forces.
I'll tell you why agency, right? And why people have this proclivity. Well, at least the theists have this proclivity. I suppose the atheists have the proclivity to say otherwise. Right? But I'll tell you why theists, I think, have the proclivity to believe in agency, and I myself prescribe to this as well. All right, there's the level of complexity that exists, all right, that of matter that exists in our planet, right? You do have two options, right? You could either say, well, this is completely random, or you could say, listen, there's got to be something behind this, something we don't understand.
I gotta ask. I gotta interrupt you here. What makes you think that things are so complex? I mean, we're apes that have really only been technologically advanced for a very short amount of time, and we're missing the unification of gravity and the known forces. And we've done pretty damn good at mapping out objective reality. So what makes you think it's got all this complexity? I hear this argument from complexity all the time. It's like these dumb fucking apes that didn't evolve to be able to even try to understand this crap. We're doing a fucking amazing job at mapping all this out, and our theories, a lot of our theories work and are quite sound, getting improved upon. But for a bunch of apes, not so complex.
Well, Trav, maybe for you, when you try to understand, we've only scratched the surface at the end of the day. At the moment, at the level of science that exists right now.
Snark, that's a platitude I'm not willing to accept.
I don't even know what platitude means.
We have not just simply scratched the surface. You know, actually, there are. You know, we make new zoological discoveries on this planet still, like in the ocean, and those are all very exciting. And but we have strong theories for almost everything, right? Like we have very strong theories for almost everything. That doesn't mean that there aren't some unanswered questions and things that we're still solving and sorting out, but we have, you know, discovered a lot. This idea that there is like still all of this stuff left to discover, that I hear that platitude thrown around all the time, and then I'm like, okay, list the things that we don't have pretty solid working models for, and there are some things which are very exciting. But this idea that there's like this this ocean of discovery before us, we may unify gravity with you know, with the standard model tomorrow, and that you know, unifies under one theory what we've observed so far in physical reality. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that I don't accept this platitude.
Let me ask you two questions, Trav. All right. First of all, do you think that we have discovered more, all right, about the universe that there is still left to discover, or do you think there is still left undiscovered? That's question
Yeah,
number one. Question number two is, what does platitude mean? Because my English is not that good.
Platitude is just a common trope that's thrown around and used. It would be like people who would say like, yeah, well, you know, and because like the mind, it's like someone might say, well, you know, because the thinking is a complex thing that we don't really quite understand, and it's like, yeah, there's some things left to understand about thinking, but we know a lot about the physical processes. That's not the best example, but if you just like Google platitudes, like common platitudes in science or in philosophy, you'll find a lot of them.
Travis,
But
I think
yeah,
I may know the one you were trying to use there.
You're quite sorry.
I think I might know the one you were trying to use there.
Oh, okay.
From Civilization 5, if the mind were so simple, we would not be able. If the mind was so simple, we could understand it. We would not be able to.
Yeah, that's a common platitude.
Yeah.
So the other,
Travis,
the
I get what you're saying about discovering a lot of stuff, but we live on this little pale blue dot, you know, and haven't been anywhere really in other than where the pale blue dot in our universe.
Oh, I mean, we have been though. You can go places without actually having to physically go there. We can, you know, we have a very good understanding of the processes of stars, gravity at very large macro scales, how it operates, the fundamental forces of what's going on. I don't want to take away from exactly what Mace's topic is about here, but as soon as you know, as we sit around in our armchairs trying to think up things that, you know, we couldn't possibly know that thing, it'll blow your mind how many strong working theories we have for the questions that any of us will come up with sitting on our couches.
I would have to say, Travis, it does seem like you're making a bit of an assumption that
Which claim?
You're assuming that we have already discovered most things that there are to discover.
I'm saying that you shouldn't claim that there is. The burden of proof is on the person that's making the positive claim about. If someone says there's so much left to discover, they adopt the burden of proof and they need to demonstrate that claim and try to demonstrate that there is so much left to discover. You're going to be Columbus out there looking for, you know, what you were really talking about. You won't be able to give a demonstration. You have to bring that to the table.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22, right?
Well, you also get down to an interesting.
I don't make a claim that there aren't oceans upon oceans of information left to discover, but I'm saying it's a common platitude to throw throw around that there's so much left to discover when they cannot demonstrate that claim.
Okay, it sounded like you were making an active claim that there isn't much left to discover. Okay.
No. Like sort of to Snark's point, like, yeah, we can look out in the universe and be like, yeah, there's a lot of shit that we don't understand. The specific soil, the specific concentration of minerals and soil on all these different planets. But that doesn't mean we don't understand things about concentration of minerals and soil and how that actually works, right? I mean, like, do you see the differentiation there? It's the difference.
Well, and I would also challenge.
Yeah.
That's a thing, Scott. I would also challenge, like, if anyone does think about something about distant planets, distant star systems, and if you are sitting down, and I challenge everyone to do this, and you think of a question like, we don't. It's like, well, I mean, how can we tell that X is like this when it's like way over there? Or how do we come to these working models of black holes and things like that? Well, I challenge you guys, like, when you do think of a question that you think is like, there's no way we could have that answer. I'm just saying that oftentimes when people come to me with these claims, I look up the information, I show them what we do know, and it's a lot. And then some of the things that we would have to do some actual experimentation to discover, if only we could get there. But a lot of it is pretty cut and dry. Like, and that has to do with understanding the the fundamental forces of reality and how the Standard Model operates.
Yep. Yeah, and like to that point, like, we can easily point out the makeup of stars based on like spectrograms. It might be it's definitely harder to try and determine like what like a specific soil composition would be on a planet that's 300 million light years away from us. That's hard. But with a spectrograph, we can look at stars and understand here's what this star is made of. Right? That's a piece of science that's been solved for a long time. Same way, like the same, like how like neon works, right? Neon lights, you could have phosphorus, or you can have neon, or you can have oxygen, and you pressurize it in a tube, and then you force electricity through it, and each gas gives off a different. So that's the way. That's how scientists can determine the makeup of stars. They'll look at a star in a spectrograph and be like, okay, well, we see spikes here, spikes here, spikes here. That means that this star is mostly made up of the elements, right?
Well, the periodic table of elements, I mean, we've added to it quite a bit in just 100 years, right? So on our one singular marble out of all of those marbles in the bag, I mean, we don't know that the periodic table as charted up by us is anywhere near complete. In fact, it's
we also don't know that we haven't solved it all, right? So that's why we shouldn't make claims about like, oh, there's so much out there left to discover on the periodic table. We don't know that. We should just simply stop making claims like that and then go and discover.
We do actually know how much of the periodic table we can know about. Like, theoretically,
the periodic table is an interesting example, Jadosio. I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example. Yeah, because
that guy Bob Lazar, who kept being like, everyone's like, he predicted element 115 before
it wasn't. Yeah,
it's like that's not. It's like a genius to do that. You learn how to do that in chemistry 101.
No, for sure. In fact, we know, like, mathematically, like through equations, they can predict what future elements will be discovered, because what makes an element, what makes it stable enough to be considered an element, is a mathematical notion that we decided upon. It's rather arbitrary to a degree.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm pretty sure the last elements that we've added to the periodic table have been man-made.
Oh yeah. Like the last 14 of them.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. And they also notably have lifetimes of under like 1 microsecond. So
Yes,
like,
exactly.
it really
Yeah,
depends what you mean by element, you know? Like most of the elements are now so unstable that they just phase out of reality instantly as soon
I'm
as you...
afraid I'm gonna have to steer this back to the original topic because, as usual, when Trav drops into the chat, we drop to 0 viewers. Do we have any actual theists in the room who would like to give us their best arguments? Melting Snow, I don't think we've heard from you yet. Going once, going twice.
I
Okay.
feel like I don't know, I'm like agnostic. I don't know what, like, just don't feel strongly one way or the other.
Okay. Dozio, how about you?
If I'm a theist?
Yeah.
No, I would put myself more in the agnostic category. Maybe theist agnostic. I don't know. There's the Gnostics and there's the agnostics, and then there's the theist and the atheist, right? That's how it divides up. Yeah, no, maybe I am a theist agnostic.
Okay, let's keep it simple. Do you believe in Yahweh?
Do I believe in Yahweh? Believe in Yahweh. No, I don't believe in Yahweh.
Okay. Do we have anyone here that does? No. Can someone send a message to Bruce?
Yeah, I know. Please get Bruce here right now.
Just so we got terms like, making sense here. Agnostic is a question of knowledge. Being Gnostic means you know. Being agnostic means you don't know. Being theist means you hold a belief in God. Being atheist means you do not hold a current belief in any God.
Yes.
It's not a mix of the three. They're not connected in that way.
I would add that
it contradictory to be an agnostic and a theist at the same time. It becomes contradictory.
I would add that
I don't think that's contradictory. That's not contradictory at all. Those are two different things.
You can be deist.
I would add that
would be labeled as an agnostic theist.
So a theist believes in a God that interacts with reality, with our reality. A deist
a deist believes that there is a God, but has no affirmations on what that God's rules, existence, or anything is. They just think there is one.
So if you're an agnostic theist, does that mean you're a deist? Or is that something separate from an agnostic theist?
That's another separate thing, I think.
Okay, good. All right.
Right. Like an agnostic theist would be someone who doesn't think they can prove it, but that they believe for one reason or another that there is a God, right?
I believed until I believed, and now I just believe because I believe.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
I have a question here. Who is actually a Gnostic atheist? I am. Like I feel pretty comfortable with saying God does not exist the same way.
How did you come to that conclusion?
I would have to say anyone who claims that is either wrong or intellectually dishonest.
No. I feel this. I feel the same.
I'd love to hear your rationale.
You may think that you know that, but you actually don't. You just believe that.
But hold on. How about just let me finish? It's like it's the same way that, like, I am Gnostic in the disbelief in unicorns. I'm Gnostic in the disbelief of a tempest in a teapot that rotates around the sun. Right? So, like that's the thing. Like the sort of the idea of like people saying I'm agnostic about this. It's the notion of the possibility. Yeah, and like I guess there could possibly be the possibility, but if we look as pragmatically in probability senses, there's no reason to actually believe these things, and that's why I say I'm Gnostic. Like I can easily say I 100% do not believe in leprechauns, and I'm Gnostic about that. I do not believe in leprechauns.
Yes. So what you're saying is you're the same thing I am. Don't say you're not the atheist. Say you have a Gnostic belief that any proposed God does not exist.
Because
that's very different than being
than a blanket statement like that. Scott, you were saying belief there, but when we're talking about Gnosticism and agnosticism, we need to reference knowledge. So
It's no,
you, yeah. So
You can't hold
do
knowledge of a
you
negative.
know? Do you know that leprechauns don't exist?
Yeah, like I use that word wrong. You're right.
No, yeah. I'm just asking you. So
Yeah.
do you know that unicorns don't exist?
Like I don't know 100% for sure, but I would
this is
say like
yeah.
like
I
Does it
know they don't
satisfy-
exist.
Does it satisfy your epistemological standard of truth to claim that you know that? That's always the question with gods, to tell if you're Gnostic or agnostic, with regards to the knowledge claim you're willing to make about those gods.
yeah. Well, epistemologically, yeah, I would say they don't exist.
So then you're claiming
But if we're talking
that
about-
they don't exist.
Epistemologically, yes. Like if we're talking about if there's ever a universe and we live in a universe that is infinite, then they could exist, but like I think
No. I'm just asking you, like, are you willing? Because are you willing to claim that ghosts don't exist, or that ghosts don't exist?
yeah, I would go that far, yeah.
Well, then that means So, and then if you're willing to claim that gods don't exist, then you are Gnostic, and then you would be a Gnostic atheist.
Wouldn't you then be required to then provide evidence for your claim? Because that would be
That all depends on. This all depends on whatever epistemological standard of truth you are operating under, because some people would come along and say the complete lack of proof is enough to satisfy their own epistemological standard of truth to claim to make a knowledge claim about the non-existence of God. But other people who feel as though they need absolute certainty, they wouldn't claim that as knowledge. They would call themselves an agnostic atheist.
No, you dropped that in there, man. An agnostic atheist? That's confusing.
Hang on,
I feel like you're forgetting what an agnostic
Let's not get too drawn down that line of thought. I do want to ask Andy his opinion on Yahweh, if that's okay. Andy, do you believe in the existence of Yahweh?
Yeah, I think Yahweh could exist.
Excellent. So we're actually, I don't know if you're aware, we're doing a Convince Me Otherwise segment right now. My position is that Yahweh does not exist. Are you able to put forward any arguments to try and convince me otherwise?
No.
Oh, why not?
Because I don't have any.
Why do you believe in him then?
For reasons that I don't think would be compelling to you.
Okay, well just give us
Nor
your
do I see the point in convincing you otherwise.
Okay, well just give us your best argument for the fun of it.
I don't think it's argumentative thing.
I mean, you don't have to. You can go if you want. Jesus Christ.
I think what he means is that he doesn't argue it towards himself.
Do it. This Andy. This is the show. This is the segment. That's what we're doing.
Do I have to?
Well, he was just.
I invite you on, and you're like, oh, do I have to be here?
I think.
Okay, let me answer. Yes, Andy, you have to. Yes, Andy has to.
What's the consequences if I don't?
Daddy Trav will give you a spanking.
Instant death.
Well, about Gnostic in this sense, I'm Gnostic that Andy won't be able to provide proof, or nobody will be able to provide proof of the leprechaun.
I'm really compassionate. I'm compassionate to the Andy point of view, because I feel like he doesn't argue towards himself to believe, like the reason that he believes in it likely is not an argument that he's made with himself, but rather this weird faith thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what it is that his belief in Yahweh is it's weak. He doesn't have any evidence supporting it, and he doesn't want to come to terms with that. So being in a debate about the existence of Yahweh would force him to realise that, which he wouldn't like. And
Well, how about this? I believe in Yahweh. I think in the same way that
that.
Andy does. Like, I believe it's a thing for me. I'm not convinced you would see it or understand it the way that I see it and understand it, but I am also sure that it is a thing for you, whether you want to or don't want to recognize it.
I think Andy gave the most eloquent explanation for his belief in God.
He didn't give an explanation.
I think that's the point. That's the most eloquent explanation for believing.
It really is.
No explanation.
There's no reason for it.
I believe in God. Don't question it. Just do.
Do or do not. There is no choosing in whether or not you believe. Just simple.
He's just saying he does.
I mean, you can believe in anything you want, but when you try and make out that belief is an actual fact, that God exists, then...
No, I disagree. I actually think it's negative. It's not good for society if people believe in things that aren't true. I think it's better for everyone if people aim to correct themselves when they're wrong and strive towards truth.
That would be nice in a utopia.
I have a question. Are you agnostic in your atheism, Mace, or are you agnostic? Do you think, like, of course there's no such thing, or do you think it's like, I don't know, but I don't?
I'm confident enough to make an active claim that Yahweh, specifically Yahweh, does not exist for many reasons which I was hoping to get into during this segment, but unfortunately I haven't had enough theists to talk about that with. But when it comes to the concept of God more broadly, not relating to any specific gods that have been named and described, I wouldn't make any active claims as to whether that does or does not exist.
Yes. Yeah.
Belief in something that you have no proof for is called faith, and I'm sure, Mace, that you have faith in your life somehow, somewhere.
I do have evidence that I'm alive.
No.
Yes, I do.
Checkmate.
I think therefore I am. I wouldn't be able to consider if I'm alive if I'm not alive.
No, Uncle. He wasn't asking you.
I'm sorry, but having faith when you don't know is an indication that you're not comfortable with being wrong.
Sorry, two people were talking there. Let's go one at a time. Big Lebowski.
Yeah, like I just wanted to reiterate to Uncle Rob, like Mace was asking a rhetorical question. He wasn't saying to you specifically, do you think Mace is alive? Like Mace says, do I think I'm alive? He's talking about himself, not like if you think he's alive, right?
I'm glad you clarified that because I was kind of confused by the question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And what did you say, Lexicon?
Honestly, I kind of view the someone who claims to have faith as an indication that the person is not interested in proving the claim to themselves. You've reached the end point and don't wish to pursue whether or not the thing is true, or just admit you don't know.
You know, Jordan Peterson said, like, on like his podcast, like how so much of just the future and life is the unknown, that the mere act of existence requires a leap of faith.
You know, it's funny you should oh, sorry, no, carry on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's funny you should mention Jordan Peterson, actually. I think he has, by far, in my opinion anyway, the best arguments for the existence of Yahweh. I think he just has such an amazing way with words, and I would really... It's never going to happen, but I would love to debate him on it myself. But anyway, sorry, I did interrupt you there. What were you saying?
That was kind of it. I kind of just wanted to bring that up. Like, I think life in itself requires so much more faith, and I think, like, I don't know why we're saying it's like almost like a type of weakness. I think it's kind of a strength too.
Oh, absolutely. I never said it was a
Right,
weakness.
I
Being
do
able to
have a
deny
question.
reality and push forward anyways is absolutely a human strength. It's super
Well,
important.
when also, it depends on what you mean by faith, right? So like you can say I have faith that it's going to snow this winter. You don't know for sure that it's going to snow, but there's a shitload of evidence that it's actually going to snow during the winter time, right? So
I would argue that's not faith.
no, no,
That's an assessment based on previous knowledge.
okay. So then, what is faith then?
Faith is
Because
believing you're going to win the battle.
oh, but even believing you're going to win the battle, like let's take like the U.S. military versus Mexico. Do you think it requires faith to believe that the U.S. is going to win versus Mexico? No, it doesn't.
No, I mean
Right?
from like the soldier's perspective, the individual soldier. Believing you'll be here at the end of the day is an act of faith in war.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of being a soldier is you don't believe that. You're literally throwing in your cards to say, I know I might die, but I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I would call that an act of faith because
purpose.
you don't know for sure whether or not you're going to survive. You don't have a good expectations of surviving, but you need to
The
believe that because if
you
you don't,
can't you
it makes
can't
you weaker.
assume that all the soldiers actively believe I'm going to survive this battle. A lot of them don't
Yeah.
think
I'm sure
that.
there's a couple that go in saying I'm going to die, but the thing is it's very common for these people to believe something not based on evidence and not based on knowledge of the situation, but purely because if you don't have that, it does make you not. This is why they tell you we're training you to survive. This is why they tell you these over and over and over and over and over in basic, because they want to instill that mentality because it's beneficial.
Yeah, but then you get like to higher level and people know that's certainly not the case, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the thing. Like I was in the military. I was in the army. Like I knew right off the bat I'm doing this, and there is a chance I'm going to die. That's fucking 100% the case across the board. I'd never had this notion being like, oh, dude, I'm totally going to live. I never had any faith that I was going to live. Like I knew I was putting myself into a situation where I could die. Right? I don't think any other soldier goes into the military without that. Well, there might be, there might be a certain amount of people who do go in without that understanding, but that doesn't mean anything, right? That doesn't mean that everybody has faith, that faith is required for this position.
Like in some ways, I would tie faith to the concept of courage in that way that it's just a simple belief that you can't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
substantiate.
Yeah, but like I guess what I'm trying to do is break down the differentiation of the idea of like taking a leap of faith or having faith in like the fact that like people around you will take care of you if something bad happens versus the idea of having like religious faith of there's something out there that we don't understand, nobody knows. You know what I mean? Like that there is a certain amount of differentiation there. That's why I don't know. Even the word faith has like 15 different definitions in the Bible or in the dictionary. There's so many different definitions on what faith actually means. So maybe it might be worthwhile to whittle it down to what we're actually talking about, right?
Well,
Like
also, in the time of like the Bible and going back to the days in which it was written and before, you had to have faith about a lot of things. I mean,
The water you weren't drinking.
yeah, I mean, even in, the days of Columbus when they headed for the New World, shit, man, that took a lot of faith, and they had no real evidence to go by. Yeah, they had no evidence to go by on a lot of things where we have that luxury of making an educated guess about whether it's going to snow in the winter. So I think that faith in the things that you don't understand and you have no evidence for meant a lot more back then, and therefore the willingness to subscribe to the story as written in the Bible, that when you die, you go to heaven and stuff, was easier to hold on to back then. But now faith is eroded because we've gone to the way of the silicon chip, and now we have data everywhere for everything. And if it's not proven by science, then it's dismissed. And again, this goes back to the Garden of Eden. And
that's not true, Uncle Rob, because they're like in the way that you're describing faith, they're like people have plenty of faith right now the way that you're describing. And I think Lexicon sort of nailed it when he was talking about, like, maybe he's talking about bravery as like a faith as a substitute linguistically for bravery, because like even right now people are doing that exact same thing. People are taking chances where they don't know what the specific outcome is going to be. And if that's what you think, if that's how you're defining faith, yeah, dude, like human beings still have that in spades all across the board. It's not like because we have Facebook now and computers, people don't have faith, right? Like people are driving Teslas with automatic driving systems, and they have a certain amount of faith that automatic driving system is gonna break when it needs to break. Do they know 100% for sure if that's gonna happen? No, they don't. But there's a decent amount of evidence there, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think we're getting sidetracked on specific definitions of faith now at this point. Like, do you see?
I don't want to have to use faith to believe in Yahweh. I just want to know. I just want evidence that says Yahweh exists. I don't want to have to believe in Yahweh. I just want evidence. I don't think that's too much to ask. Just something that confirms it, I mean, that's all I want. I don't want much. Just some clear-cut piece of evidence, and then I'm like, okay, Yahweh exists. I don't want to use faith.
Yeah, like you no longer need faith to like think that a self-driving car can exist. There's evidence of it. We have evidence that cars can drive themselves now. Now there might be certain aspects within that car driving itself that you could say you're quote unquote taking on faith, but I do think there is still evidence there, even if it's not 100% sure, right? So like you can look at like Tesla's auto braking system and it works 80% of the time. You could make the claim, well, you're having faith that it's going to like work for you, even though we know 20% of the time it's not going to work. But you're still showing faith in saying that it's gonna work for you.
Right, because there's the data that shows it's successful 80% of the time, and
exactly.
Bloop, blop, bleep, computer convinces me to have faith more easily versus getting bit by a flea and getting the bubonic plague and hoping that, I don't know, that was a bad metaphor, but it's easier now.
I know where you're going. Yeah, I know where you're going. Yep. Yeah, but I mean, I guess do you see my point? Is like I'm trying to separate the idea of faith, of religious faith versus like people like taking the colloquial term of faith when they think like, okay, well, I have faith that when I go to work and I work 40 hours this week, that I'm going to get paid this week. You don't know for sure that you're going to get paid. There's plenty of times where people have worked and they haven't gotten paid, but you have a certain amount of faith based on the system there that's available that says, hey, if I go and put this work in, I'm going to get paid.
Oh, we got a comment from Andy. I don't want Yahweh to exist, Mace. I just don't want to have this conversation.
Fucking Andrew.
Well, at least we got some input from him. Look, I'm gonna close it up here because we're not really getting a lot of activity on the subject, and yeah, we've got basically no views anyway. But we'll definitely circle round to this topic and similar topics in future segments as well.
There was something I was going to ask you. When that Canadian Catholic was here,
yeah,
and he was saying, because he made that claim, and I didn't think we asked him. I was going to ask him. I think we should have asked him. What did he mean when he said morally God had morally sufficient reasons for allowing evil? We never did get that from him.
I didn't bother asking because I already knew what he was going to say. He was going to say us humans aren't capable of understanding what his reasoning is.
All right, that old chestnut.
Yeah, but I was
actually have a long form conversation with that guy because I almost committed the Chariots of Iron website to memory, and I think it'd be really fun to go over some of the extreme contradictions in the Bible with him.
Yeah, I did actually intend to talk about other contradictions in the Bible with him, but he left too early for me to get to them, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I do want to say, like, Mace, if we go back to this topic, let's maybe like get Bruce shoehorned in. Let's get Canadian, so that, like, we know what we're gonna have people. Because right now it's like in this channel in general, it's like 90% atheists. So it's like a hard. It's gonna be a hard.
I didn't know that. I thought it was a good 50-50. My bad.
Oh yeah, no.
I think part of the problem, though, like when the arguments for like this Old Testament style God as outlined by the Bible or the Torah, that's hard to believe. That's a bunch of shitty storytellers getting shit mixed up over so long, and now we're all left to debate.
Completely agree, and yet there are still people that believe in him for some reason.
But if you go broader than that and you talk about like a higher power, that's opening up new doors. Like, I believe in a higher power and can debate that, just not the Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah thing.
So what would your higher power be, like extraterrestrials who created human beings?
No, like more like a spaghetti type.
I wouldn't bother debating against the idea of a higher power because that's unfalsifiable. However, Yahweh is falsifiable because there's detailed descriptions of him in the Bible, and some of them are verifiably untrue or contradictory to one another.
Can you give me an example?
Like, let's say the idea that God is incapable of doing evil. That runs in contradiction to some Bible stories where he does obviously very evil things. For example, Noah's Ark, where he drowns literally every living thing on the planet, including millions of babies.
Not if you define good and evil by the will of God.
Okay, how about one of these? God, there was this lovely time in history where he decided it was a good idea to kill 40 kids for a verbal insult made by 2 of them. Please justify that.
Remember that story.
Even if you do say that morality is decided by God and therefore he can kill whoever he wants and it's not immoral, God admitted that what he did in the story of Noah's Ark was evil. That's what the rainbow was. The rainbow was an apology and a promise to never do it again, meaning, I'm sorry I did a bad thing. Which is a bit strange coming from someone who can't be bad.
That's not how I learned that story.
Also,
what were you taught the rainbow was?
About Chariots of Iron is,
hang on, Lexicon.
No, the rainbow was a promise to not bring another flood, but
why?
Never an admission of evil.
Why did he promise not to bring a flood if it's a good thing?
Why did he promise not to bring a flood if it's a good thing?
Yeah, if it's so great, why does he promise not to do it again?
Yeah.
Is that what a morally justifiable evil thing is that he allowed because the end consequence was greater than the destruction it caused?
I think because he promises not to do it again, that sounds like a naughty child saying, I'm sorry, I promise I won't do it again. That's what it sounds like to me.
Exactly.
Well, again, all right. First of all, that's a beautiful claim. I love that. That's really, really good. But again, what you're saying is that the problem is you're basing this on your subjective morality. All right. So
no, he himself apologized for it.
He didn't apologize again.
He promised not to do it again. Okay, let's say he half apologized then, because that is kind of a half apology. It's like, yeah, okay, I won't do it again. I won't apologize this time, but I won't do it again. Why?
It's specifically a label of
I'm sorry.
contract between God and
I
man. You
called
can't
all
do it
these
again.
people the N word. Yeah.
But why is he promising not to do it again
I'm
if
not
it's
gonna
not
claim
bad?
to have I'm not gonna claim to have an answer to that. It's a brilliant question.
It's
and I'll have to get back.
self-evident.
I'll do some research.
It's self-evident.
I'll-
If someone promises
It's
not to
not-
do
wait a second, it's
something,
not
there is
just
a
a promise,
hang
it's a
on.
covenant.
If someone promises not to do something, they are strongly inferring that that thing is bad.
It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't just a promise. It was a covenant. It was an agreement. You don't come to an agreement unless you have a problem with it.
I'm not gonna. Do you have any more examples? I like that one. I'll research it and get back to you.
God's all powerful. He can't do anything about
Mace.
iron chariots. That was his excuse for not being able to help the Jews at the battle.
Wait, what? Say that again.
God is all powerful, and yet he can do nothing about the iron chariots. And the fact
Which
that
iron
their
chariots?
opponents had iron chariots was his excuse for not being able to help the Jews with the battle.
When? Which battle are we talking about?
I'll Google it. I don't know the exact verses in the Bible.
Mace,
It's
what
such
other
a clear
examples do you have,
contradiction that
Mace?
it was literally used as the title for the website.
Whilst Lexicon's looking for that one, I just wanted to ask you this. I've always asked this question whenever evil and God comes up. It's in Isaiah 45, verse 7. The Lord says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things.
Yes.
Why? He says he creates evil.
Yeah.
So
Well,
then
if-
God creates evil because that's what he's saying in that verse.
Again, him creating evil, I have less of an issue with because the definition of good and evil is a completely human notion, right? And of course, he creates evil. He created humans, and he created this notion. And again,
he created
if you're
Satan as well.
yes,
Yeah, but
yes,
Judges
100%.
1:19.
Yeah, but God by definition is an all-powerful being, so he could have chosen not to create evil. So if he did create evil, then fundamentally there's morality fucking issues there, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point because he blatantly says, I create evil. He says, I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So he's saying he creates
100%. Yes, 100% he creates evil. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
So then he does do evil things then if he creates evil.
Yes.
Well, Snark, what do you say to that?
Again, we're entering a very complex realm, right? Because let's say you believe that God created the world, right? So the whole notion of good and evil, right? We're also created by God automatically. Correct or not incorrect?
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah.
Great.
But
So
evil is that morally justifiable thing that was created because in exchange for evil, humans get free will, and that's more valuable than any evil that we can create. Case closed. That's why he created evil. No, wait. I don't know.
No, because that happened beforehand. Angels had fallen before Earth was ever even created, right?
Yes, exactly. There was the war in heaven, which they lost. And they got cast down, fallen angels. Yep.
Snark, is there anything that God could do that would convince you that he was evil?
well, not if you believe that he exists.
Yeah, so that's a problem.
Not if you believe he exists, because again, if he exists, then he created us. If he created us, the entire notion of good and bad was invented by him. And if the entire notion of good and bad was invented by him, then
I disagree. He claims he gives people free will. You can't do that if you also are the dictator of all that is good and wrong.
you're talking about the free will claim.
No, I'm saying God straight up says in the Bible you have free will. If that's the case, he can't do that, and also it's a logical contradiction. You can't be the arbiter of what is good and evil if you're giving people free will, because then they have their own personal moralities.
Even like if you really take it as what it says, God knows what is going to happen in 100,000 years from now. So how can human beings actually have free will if God already knows what's going to happen? It's an impossibility.
You're talking about the free will again. You're talking about the
no,
free
no,
will claim.
but there is no free will. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Again, you're claiming there is no. Yeah, I understand.
hold on. Just let me throw this out. So you have a being that creates a universe, and this being knows everything that's going to happen in that universe, even past the point that any other being lives. He knows everything that's ever going to happen in your life. This is already laid out quite clearly. He knows it all. So how in the world can you possibly have free will if he already knew at the time that he created the universe, he knew you were going to do this, that, and the other step? How could there be free will? Right? It just doesn't make any sense because he already knew. Right?
No. So this I disagree with. This I completely disagree with. Right? Just because you know, right, what a person will choose doesn't mean he didn't choose.
Oh no, but God is the one who created the system in the first place. So God is the one who created the person who's going to make that choice. Not only did God create that person, God created that person millions of years, or let's go by the Christian Bible, thousands of years before they ever existed, right? And so, and if that's the case, if he created a system where he already knows what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do next week, how in the world do you have free will? He created you. It's not like it's
Let me. I get your question completely, and let me phrase your question in a different way and tell me if this is what you mean, just to make sure we're on the same page. While God was creating Adam, right, at the moment he created Adam, he knew he was going to eat from the fruit, or he didn't know? He knew. And despite that, he created him exactly in that way.
Yes.
Right? This is your question. Yes. There is no, I haven't heard a good answer to this question. I've never heard a good answer to this question.
Well, that's the problem is because this is written by people who are trying to like write allegories on the way human beings exist emotionally, and they try to put it down in a sense where it's like, here are the rules, but like that's not the case, right? And that's the like to me that's the fundamental issue that I see.
Or it's like the New Testament when Jesus tells Peter, "You will deny me 3 times." And Peter says, "No, I will never do that." What Peter doesn't know is it's already been planned, prophesied. All he has to do is just sit back and enjoy the ride. He doesn't have the free will to stop it from happening.
Yeah, so again, the answer that religious people use is our tiny human brains cannot grasp or comprehend a timeline that isn't linear. And therefore, we cannot understand or try to understand that sort of thing. Because what you're doing is you're taking a linear timeline and you're saying, well, if at this point in the timeline, you know what's going to happen in the next point in the timeline, how could you do this in this point in the timeline? Right? And they'll say, but again, I can't say I understand this answer, but the answer is your puny brain cannot comprehend a non-linear time frame.
That's very convenient, Snark. That's a very convenient answer.
I agree with you. That is very convenient.
Snark said that he doesn't necessarily agree with it, but
no, not necessarily. I don't understand it. I don't understand that answer at all.
You don't understand it because that's the thing. Like if you make that statement, then also how could you say any human being could even understand the Bible? Right? Like how any human being understand any of it at all?
Well, the Bible was written for humans, according to that theory, right? If you're a theist, you believe the Bible was created for humans, and therefore humans can understand it because it was created for them.
But if it was created for them, then people could also understand how God had planned something, and we still have free will. Now there's this one portion of this book that's like, okay, any human being cannot possibly even have a rational answer for. How can we have a rational answer for any of it?
No, I'll give you the rule of thumb that theists use. All right, the rule of thumb is when you're trying to comprehend God's perspective, like, well, when God was doing this, how could He create free will? How is there free will? If God created us, when you're trying to understand God's decision making, you cannot.
Yes.
All right, you cannot. But when you're trying to understand the Bible, which was created for you, not the decision making of the Bible, not why God said not to eat pork, not why God said to, whatever it is, right? That you won't understand. The reasoning behind things you will never understand. Okay?
I disagree with that premise.
Yeah,
That makes the argument you can't have knowledge. That's dumb.
That's the reason they're still theists, though, is they have that perspective. But if they did try to understand it, then they would come to the conclusion that, hey, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yes,
and there's a lot.
If they believed they needed to understand it, if they believed they needed to understand why, then they would all fail miserably.
That's the purpose of the Bible or any religious text, is the human condition of trying to understand why.
Okay, that's another argument, but theists will believe that understanding why is unnecessary. It's irrelevant, unnecessary, and impossible.
It goes back to the
you are to have
issue.
a childlike mind.
They just write as much crazy bullshit and see how long people will continue to believe, and that's necessary. Human beings must believe. The minute the human race stops believing in a God, God ceases to exist. So for as long as people exist, there must be the active belief process taking place in order to bring, to manifest the notion of a higher power. So we're just tools for the existence of this other creature.
No, that's the notion of man created God. God didn't create man.
Yes. Well said.
Yeah, but that's from an atheist perspective. Theists will disagree with you. Theists will say no, God exists regardless of whether human beings believe in Him or not.
Snark, do you believe that we're incapable of knowing why God did the things He did? Let's say in the Old Testament.
Well, for example, the free will argument that Lebowski was bringing. Absolutely, I've never heard a good answer for that.
I've never heard a good answer either. That's
a good answer to what exactly? I'm sorry. In terms of
So I'll put the question again in my words, the way I understand it most clearly. While God was creating Adam, did He know that Adam would eat from the fruit, or did He not know? He knew, right?
Because he must have not known. I mean, from your perspective, he must have not known, because that would make him immoral.
Well, I don't know if immoral is the issue.
Because he's punishing the human race for doing something that he knew they were going to do.
You comprehend the question perfectly. I've never heard a good answer to that.
Not just knowing something that they would do. He compelled it to happen. So He compelled Eve to eat from the fruit of knowledge, eat from the tree of knowledge, and then punish people for that. Like that's the craziest thing.
I wouldn't say compelled. I'd say coerced.
No. Like if he created everything exactly as it is, he compelled Eve to eat.
No, he gave her free will. He coerced her because he put the tree in a really convenient place right in the middle of the garden, gave it really tasty looking fruits, and put a talking snake on it.
Yeah, but he already knew she would eat from that fruit with the talking.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying he literally compelled it to happen. Like he set the situation.
It's coercion, because she still could have said no. She was just weak-minded.
No, like
she couldn't have said no. She already knew she would do it.
He's the one that made Eve in the first place, so he knew what decision she was going to make.
Yes. It's all predetermined. It was planned, so it had already planned. This is what Eve will do. So Eve never had a choice. It had already been planned by God.
I suppose. Yeah, it's hard to say that free will can exist if He's all-knowing.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's the point. Yeah. Like you cannot have a being that's all knowing and all powerful and all caring.
Yeah. So again, the
Any one
only
of those
answer.
lengths out and it'll work, but you can't have all three of those posts. It just does not work. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Earlier I was asked to the Iron of Chariots thing. And the Lord was with Judah, and with him he drove out the inhabitants of the mountain, but could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley, for they had chariots of iron.
Well,
He was with
that's
Judah helping
logical.
them out,
That
and
makes
he
sense.
couldn't do anything about the chariots of iron, apparently.
Yeah,
Let me
that's
look
normal.
this
That
up.
no, that
Let
actually
me
makes
look
sense
this
because everyone knows you can't do anything about iron chariots. That's just it's common
he can
knowledge.
stop the sun.
Lexicon, where is that, please?
Judges 119.
Thank you.
It's fucking hilarious, Mace.
Snark. So if there was something in the Bible that was immoral, you wouldn't be able to see it because of your definition of God.
Again, if you believe that God created human beings, then our entire perception of morality is irrelevant.
Well, not quite, because God, I mean Yahweh, has actually told us what is moral and what isn't, and there are numerous examples of him doing things which he has said are immoral himself. For example,
Yes,
killing people.
Absolutely.
Well, moral for humans, right? Those rules don't apply to him.
Ah, okay.
He's not a God I want to follow. Like he's not going to follow his own rules, you know.
Again,
like,
according to theists, it's not about want. Nobody cares what you want.
But when I do want to reiterate right now, you guys, Snark is playing devil's advocate. just to be
I feel
clear
like he
about
believes
like,
it.
what's going on.
It feels as though he believes that some part of him like is taking this position.
Sure, for sure. I said ahead of time. The first thing I said in here is I'm at a crossroads at the moment. I was raised religious, extremely religious, and I am at a crossroads in my life at the moment.
Don't worry, you'll get through it either way.
What is?
Isn't that what we go up against with theists? Like it feels like they believe it. I just feel like if something's though proven to be contradictory, then it would be great if they could get educated on that and they would stop calling like God benevolent and all-knowing when we've demonstrated that these things are contradictory, and like they should maybe get re-educated or something so that they're not pushing these ideas as truths anymore.
I would never. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Snark, you said you're at a crossroads. You're on a crossroads right now. So what does that crossroads look like to you? Like one is that I mean you're Jewish, right?
Correct.
So you would say that the Old Testament is the infallible word of God. That's one choice, I guess, and then what's the other choice?
That the Old Testament is man-made, invented by humans, not influenced by the creator of the universe at all.
What do you think was more likely?
I cannot listen. At the moment, I'll tell you, actions speak louder than words. At the moment, I'm living my life completely unreligiously, like an atheist. So, I suppose that tells you where I'm headed.
You dirty heathen.
There we go. You got it.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Are you doing lots of blackjack and hookers?
Blackjack less. Casinos here are complicated too. Like they don't really exist in Israel. But I have been having a lot of sex, yes. Not hookers, but
is that forbidden in Judaism? Pre-marriage?
Yes. The main issue with sex is whatever. Yeah, it's forbidden. I'm not going to go into details.
Actually, speaking of hookers, are hookers allowed in heaven?
Well, thinking of heaven in physical terms is foolish.
you know, the Old Testament doesn't speak of afterlife directly, right?
Not in details, no.
Yeah, doesn't it talk about the war in heaven?
What would be the incentive to
Yeah,
be a
but
hooker if
hold
you
up.
have like everything you want?
Heaven, by the Christian conception, didn't
Well,
exist in the time period that was written. The war in
Like you
heaven is
wouldn't hope
referring
for
to
money.
literal war between gods.
That's in Book of Revelations, Mace. The part where there's a verse where it mentions that the war in heaven and they lost. I know that's in Revelations, but that's in the New Testament. That's
New
like the
Testament.
last book. That's the last book in the New Testament.
Yeah, the Old Testament talks about Sheol, which is like translated in different ways, but it's like a grave basically. But Snark would probably know more about that than me.
Well, what about the devil? What, like, the devil's in the Old Testament, so
Yes.
doesn't he get sent to hell?
No.
Oh, explain what
Not in the Old
happens.
Testament.
What happens with the devil in the Old Testament?
Okay, so the devil in the Old Testament, and again, just because I was born and raised in a religious family does not mean I have a full 100% grasp of the Old Testament. I was a very bad student as a kid. Let's be very clear there. But the devil is man's proclivity to immoral actions, and again, morality defined only by what God dictated. So the devil isn't an actual existing being. It isn't a being that exists. It's mankind's proclivity.
But what about Lucifer, though? I thought that was a person.
Mm.
Isn't Lucifer an angel who then became the devil?
That's a Christian concept.
Yeah, that's a Christian concept, not a Jewish one.
Okay. And is the snake being Lucifer in disguise also a Christian concept?
No.
That wasn't confirmed. That wasn't confirmed explicitly in canon until Revelation, so it's Christian.
Oh.
Yeah, again, the snake did convince Eve to eat from the fruit, but that was again, it's the proclivity to immoral actions.
And who allowed the snake to be there?
No, we spoke about this. There is no good answer to that one.
I came up with a point about Yahweh. This isn't really about why I believe or like to convince Mace otherwise about Yahweh existing, but I think it's an important point about this topic because the Bible having contradictions in it and contradictions about Yahweh isn't really proof positive that Yahweh doesn't exist. It just means that the document describing Yahweh is a bit unreliable. Like if somebody wrote something about me and there was a bunch of contradictions and mixed up information, it doesn't mean I don't exist.
I would say
it would logically cause somebody who never met me before to maybe question my existence, but it's not proof positive.
I have to disagree with you a little bit there. If someone was to write a fantasy story with a character that was based on you, had your name, but in fact was not you because was described in ways that don't apply to you, and there are stories of this character doing things that you never did, I would have to say that's really a different character. That character is not you.
I mean, it would be a fictionalized version of me. It would be an inaccurate version of me.
Loosely based on you, I mean, nah, because that's like saying Jon Snow's a real person because he's loosely based on Julius Caesar. So, nah.
I think that would be more of an inspiration type thing.
And how is that different to a god who is described as being responsible for flooding millions of people and then apologizing for it, being incapable of evil? Like so a god who does all these things which are verifiably contradictory or untrue. Isn't it clear that that god, as described in the Bible, doesn't exist? If a god does exist, it's not that one. That one may be loosely based on a real one, who knows? But it's not that one. That's my claim, anyway.
I mean, if you want to be very specific on what the text says and say, unless the text is accurate to what this being that's being described is, you can't say that the being in the book exists.
Well, I was very specific. In the title of this video, it is Allah/Yahweh does not exist. So that's not to say that Allah/Yahweh are not characters based on a god that does exist. Very well may be the case. Maybe they are based on a real god, but the characters themselves,
specifically as they are described.
yeah, the characters themselves, as described in the religions that they relate to, are definitely not real.
Yes, I would have to agree that Yahweh or Allah, in a way that exists 100% accurate to how they are described in their texts, I don't think that could logically exist. I would agree with you.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing I claim. I don't make claims about any other gods. In this video, anyway. I mean, I could make claims about other gods that are described in detail. The thing is, the more detail religions go into about the gods, the more certain you can be that those gods aren't real, because you come across more verifiably false claims. Anyway,
I think Yahweh
sorry, what was that?
I think if Yahweh does exist, he was just the most popular god in Israel who realized just how much he could screw with people.
So anyway, I think it's Tav time now. I'll just read out the results from the poll that I did on YouTube. The poll question was, does Yahweh exist? We got 16 votes. 31% said yes, 50% said no, 19% said I don't know. So it seems the majority of people agree with me on this. Yahweh does not exist.
And as we all know, that's how we determine what's true.
Indeed.
You know what's a more important question, though? Which one exists less, Yahweh or Allah?
Well, they're the same god. It's a different name, isn't it? The same, but
No, they're not.
They are. They're both. The Abrahamic God is just one god, but they just give him a different name.
Allah is the Islamic take on Yahweh. They're closely linked concepts, but they're not identical.
If you look at it, though, like historically, like Yahweh is the take of the Canaanite gods. Like a lot of historians believe that the Israelites came from the Canaanites and based their new god on the gods they used to have that the Canaanites had. So, so that's just their take on their god. They wanted to be more individualized to their new culture, so that they developed their own god.
Yeah, I heard that as well. They were influenced by the Canaanites.
Yeah, exactly.
The Israelites were always a small sub-faction of the Canaanites.
But yeah, the Canaanites were there before the Israelites.
And then Yahweh Shai had them brutally, not genocided, but defeated and enslaved. So, well, that's the propaganda book that we read from the Israelites. We don't know the truth unless you rely on archaeology. Well, you can't rely on archaeology because there is no story of the sea splitting and 600,000 people walking through it. There are no tablets, no archaeological evidence. So it's all just fantasy.
Yeah, there is no archaeological evidence of the Israelites ever being enslaved in Egypt or there ever being a mass exodus.
There is for the enslavery, but not for the exodus.
It looks like the Israelites pretty much mostly just always lived among the Canaanites and then eventually broke away.
But not there was definitely archaeological evidence for Jews being enslaved in Egypt, but not at an exceptional rate, like the same rate that you'd find just from normal people traveling.
And of course, I don't think the Egyptians have any account of mysterious plagues.
Yeah, or a mass exodus happened.
Yeah, they definitely jot that one down. So
Wait a minute.
today, a third of my workforce decided